Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called Please Throw Me Away. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! We are introduced to our main character, who goes by the name Karina Bifta. It seems she's been adopted from the streets by a powerful duke, who took her in only because she looked like his daughter who had recently passed from a rare disease called Scarlet disease. It had spread throughout the kingdom, and its painful and degrading symptoms, which always led to death, caused speculation to rise that those who caught it had made a deal with the devil. So having a member of your family die from it would lead to the family's downfall. That's why the Duke had taken her in, telling her that if she played the role of his dead daughter, well, she'd get whatever she desired. Well, it didn't pan out like that. Everyone in the castle was very abusive of her while she was growing up, even the servants. And now, 10 years after being adopted, she's going to get into an arranged marriage with the Grand Duke Hexion. She was cast aside after the Duke had another daughter. Before going, she finds out she's in fact a bastard child of the Duke, but Karina wishes she'd never known that. While heading to Hexion's estate, Karina's carriage gets attacked by men dressed as knights of the dukedom, and they end up murdering her, letting her believe the Duke, her father, had sent them to kill her. She wishes, while dying, to have one more chance to live her life, and thus, a voice tells her time will rewind for her, and Karina wakes up again in her bed in the Duke's mansion. Karina is woken up by her personal maid, Bella, who tells her she has to get ready, as Paris, her older brother, has returned from the academy. Remembering Paris had finished school 2 years prior, Karina asks Bella what year it is and is shocked to hear she woke up 3 years prior to her death. She knows that 1 year from then, the youngest daughter of the Duke will be born, and she'll be cast out and ignored right after that. Thus, Karina decides to do things differently this time and run away before that happens. She goes down to the dining hall where the whole family is waiting. She greets her parents and Paris, who, just like always, doesn't even look in her direction when replying to her, always with a cold and distant look in his eyes. She realizes she wasted her time trying to earn affection from this family, and decides to play this game no further, so she excuses herself and leaves. She then goes to the library to get more acquainted with the current topics, as she's forgotten most of what happened that year, and remembers that the yearly hunting competition will soon come, so she cleverly decides to gift the knight who'll be the winner a tassel. She later finds Bella yelling at her, scolding her for having wandered around the palace. Karina realizes now that Bella, even though being her personal maid, never showed her any gentleness nor respect. She decides it's enough and slaps her in the face, ordering her with a menacing look to beg her to stay. Karina is starting to enjoy herself for the first time in her life, finally being able to enjoy nice meals as she used to feel too nervous to eat anything before. She's determined on leaving the duchy and doing something on her own, thinking maybe she can join an adventurers guild to pursue her interest in archaeology. She's studied hard since a young age, mastering very diverse topics, as she'd always worked hard to try to impress her father, though it never seemed to be enough for him. She even remembers how she used to always make tassels for her father and brother for the hunting competition, even though they never accepted them, causing her to be ridiculed by her peers. Now she's free of the pressure to be loved by them, choosing to save herself instead. Karina goes to a shop to get the materials she needs to make a tassel for the knight that will win the competition that year. She's warmed by the friendliness of the shop attendant and ends up buying black ribbon and glass beads. As she's returning home, Paris notices something different in her gaze, and it appears that Paris, the Duke, and Bella are meeting at the Duke's office to discuss Karina's new behavior. The morning of the hunting competition has arrived, and Karina is getting ready to board the carriage that will take her there. Bella is much more wary of her these days, though Karina isn't fooled by her, as she knows she's been reporting her every move to her father. Karina starts feeling uneasy while boarding the carriage, and appalled, she notices the Duke boarding it with her. She's quivering with nervousness all the way there, and finally realizes, or remembers, that it's because it was in a carriage that she had died last time around, by the orders of the same man who's sitting before her right now. He asks her if she's feeling ill, but she denies so. Then, he questions her about her recent change in behavior, asking why she stopped calling him father, but she cleverly replies that she's just trying to be respectful, asking him in return how she would usually act. They reach the Fulham Forest, where the competition takes place. Once they arrive, Karina tries looking for the knight in black armor, as he'll be the winner that year, and she spots him. However, she's called back by her father before she can give him her tassel, and he disappears from her sight. She again cleverly calls the Duke father while in public, an action which is also noted by him. The Duke leads her to the family's tent, where she's expected to spend the whole week the competition lasts. Bella is ushering her to her bedchambers in the tent, when she tells her that a letter from the second son of the Bifta family, Paris's younger brother, and her supposedly older brother, Kuarn, has arrived, saying that he'll be returning home soon. Karina gets chills as she suddenly remembers his return, tormenting her as he did when they were younger. Apparently, he's become a very skilled mage and swordsman. Karina staggers over some papers and finds a map which seems to have the hunting trails marked. She gets excited by it, as she can use it to wander around while the competition's taking place. Just as she's about to leave, the Duchess enters the tent. She's glaring at her, as always, and Karina swiftly hides the map, turning her head and not greeting the Duchess. The Duchess questions her about it, and Karina faces her, telling her she'd never liked her greetings, to which the Duchess slaps her twice. She then harshly tells her not to speak back to her, and Karina rushes out of the tent, tears welling up her poor eyes. Poor thing. How come these people are so cruel to her? What has she ever done? Karina runs straight into the forest, running into a huge tombstone which has markings of some ancient language. Obviously, she doesn't feel like going back to her tent just yet, so she decides to sit down and try to translate it. Before she realizes, it's already dusk, so she's standing up to head back to the tents when she hears a low growl coming from somewhere in the forest near her. She fears there might be a wild animal preying on her, and just like that, a hungry wolf appears in front of her, ready to attack. She starts getting her shoes off to be able to run away faster. Weird move, but okay. And starts running away just when it pounces at her. Miraculously, the Black Knight appears and shields her, killing the wolf with one swift move of his sword. He holds her and asks if she's okay. He also informs her that everyone is looking for her in the camp, as she never returned though it was turning dark, and gives her directions to follow to return to camp. Surprised, she asks him if he's not going to accompany her there, which surprises her even more. But he just tells her he'll watch as she leaves because he wishes to stay out a bit longer. Finally, Karina gets the idea that it might actually be a good time to hand him the tassel, and so she takes it out of her pocket and offers it to him. He's a bit hesitant of accepting it at first, asking Karina why she's offering him her tassel, even though they don't even know each other. Of course, Karina can't tell him it's because she knows he'll win the competition, so she smartly tells him that it'd be rude for him not to accept it, finally getting him to agree. However, Karina gets a bit flustered as the knight also asks her to put it on him, as he saw the other ladies do it like that. Thus, she pins it on his chest and he kisses her hand in return, telling her he'll dedicate his victory to her. After that, she finally returns to camp. She goes into her tent, telling a dazed Bella to prepare something more comfortable for her to wear than a dress for the next day. She goes into the tent to find a furious Duke waiting for her. He excuses everyone from the room and asks her what she was doing out, but unsatisfied with her reply, he throws a teacup next to her. He reminds her that she should be fulfilling her role of Karina Bifta, making her shudder, and telling her she's gone out of her mind, even bringing up the incident with Bella. Karina tries standing up for herself, asking the Duke if it wouldn't be troublesome for him too if she were to stop performing her role. But he just smirks at her, telling her he'll starve her to death. So, Karina collects herself and decides to bear this abuse 1 year longer, when she'll finally make her escape. Back in the woods, the Black Knight seems to be having some trouble keeping himself together. The knight's having some health issues and can't find the medicine that'll help him get better. However, before he even needs to, the tassel Karina gives him starts shining and he suddenly feels all right. It's the next morning and Bella lays out a dress picked by the Duke for Karina to wear that day. Karina makes Bella leave her chambers and starts reading the translations of the tombstone she wrote the day prior, which retold a sort of fairy tale-like story about the forest, talking of magical creatures and doorways to magical dimensions hidden within the forest. She then remembers her near-death encounter with the wolf the day prior and tells herself she'll never return, but at the same time, She feels as if she's being called back by it. Karina's having tea with some other noble ladies. One who she knows will die of Carlet disease half a year from then, and another, more annoying one, named Lady Aaliyah. She's notorious for being a troublemaker and has brought a lot of hardship on her father, a marquess. She seems to be trying to pick a fight with Karina, but she just ignores her. Karina is feeling the urge to visit the tombstone one last time, so she excuses herself from the tea table and leaves for the forest. Meanwhile, 3 hooded men approach the tombstone, talking to each other about how it appears to be acting up. Karina goes to the tombstone and is translating again when she feels as though someone is watching her. She's then startled by the appearance of the Black Knight, who tells her he's been following her since she entered the woods alone. She questions him about the hunting competition, asking him whether he should be doing something more important in efforts of winning the darned thing, to which he replies he's done enough. The knight then notices the tombstone and is quite captivated by it, asking Karina to tell him what she's translated up until now, showing interest in her as he considers people who can read ancient languages to be very rare. She figures nothing bad will come of it and tells him the end of the narration on the tombstone, in which the author tells the reader that the rest of the story can be found on the other tombstones scattered in the forest, and a peculiar warning about not angering the forest master. The knight also appears to be quite interested in the story, and so he offers Karina to go with him to the forest twice a month to translate the rest of the tombstones. Karina is quite opposed to this, as she doesn't even know what this man looks like, but she's trying to refuse him in a polite and hilarious manner. She finally asks him why he's so interested in her, and he tells her it's because she gave him the tassel, asking her if she made it from anything in particular. Karina likes to avoid any sentimental misunderstandings by telling him she just gave it to him because she has no one else to give it to. But he tells her that it might be too late to clarify now. Karina tries to clarify that the tassel was only a thank you for having saved her, but he's not wrong when he points out that he thought she'd made the tassel black because it would suit him. So, just to get rid of him more easily, Karina promises to give him a day of her time if he wins the hunting competition, thinking he won't be able to make up for the lost time he spent talking with her. He gleefully accepts. The last day of the competition ends and the knights are coming home dissatisfied. Karina meets with the Duke in Paris, who asks the Duke about the Black Knight and is told to stay away from him, even though he turns to look at Karina to tell her snarkily that she can get close to him if she wants. That douche. The next day rolls over and it's finally time to announce the winner of the competition. Of course, the Black Knight won by having hunted an astounding amount of animals in just 1 hour, impressing everyone. It is then revealed that the Black Knight is none other than Grand Duke Hexion Milatrio, Karina's future arranged husband 3 years from now. She notices he starts heading her way, drawing everyone's attention, and before she can get away, he kneels before her and offers her the trophy, just as he promised. The Black Knight then heads back to the stage, as he's expected to give an acceptance speech, leaving a speechless Karina behind holding the trophy with everyone's eyes on her. That insufferable Lady Aaliyah approaches her to mock her about having received Hexion's attention, as he is avoided by everyone noble because he's rumored to bear a curse which renders him horrendous. However, Karina seems to be quite fed up with Aaliyah, mocking her in return for having given her tassel to a knight who won nothing. Aaliyah starts to make a fuss, raising her voice to make a scene and make Karina look bad, but Karina has an ace up her sleeve, as she remembers from the future that Aaliyah had become addicted to a foreign drug, which will ultimately lead to her family's downfall. So she uses this information against her, discreetly warning her not to make a fuss and to watch her words from now on. You go, girl. After the ceremony is done, the Duke questions Karina about her relationship with Hexion, but Karina is intrigued to see he doesn't seem to be annoyed or angered by it. Back in their tent, Lord Hexion interrupts them and asks the Duke to see Karina, and oh boy is he gorgeous. Not gonna lie, I was already getting impatient about how the Grand Duke might look, and God am I not disappointed. Karina appears to be even more shocked than we are by his devilishly good looks. Hexion asks to talk to Karina alone outside, and after telling the Duke he'll only be talking to her, talks back to him in a quite unrespectful manner, leaving both him and Karina shocked. Outside, he confides in Karina that he doesn't like the Duke a bit, so he doesn't respect him either. The Grand Duke asks Karina to call him Hexion, but she can only manage to call him Lord Hexion, whilst still blushing uncontrollably. He seems to be quite the flirtatious kind. It seems he's surrounded by rumors as he's someone who's been given a huge title and a lot of influence, apparently out of the blue. And as he always conceals his left arm even in summer, some rumors about him being cursed and scarred also began going around. Hexion asks her about when she'd like to have the date she promised him in return for having won the tournament. She cleverly remembers that 7 days from then, Kuarn will be returning home, so to avoid him, Karina asks Hexion for their date to be then. He accepts, and then he suddenly gets the cute urge to prepare homemade lunches to take. Gosh, I could just melt. He also asks her if she'll also give him permission to call her by her name, and she gives it to him, not caring much for what he calls her, but at the same time, not being able to say the name Karina Bifta from her mouth. She's never said it to herself before, and swore to never do so, as she fears she'll lose the last part of Adele, the lost orphan which she still protects. She returns to her tent, and the Duke questions her what she talked about with Hexion. She tells him it was about a promise she made to him, but tells him not to worry about it, causing the Duke to become annoyed. Karina's not facing the Duke, but she stands her ground, thinking maybe she can hold her ground a little more now that she's involved with the Grand Duke. She tells him that she doesn't need to tell him, and that to fulfill her role as Karina, she also doesn't need to report her every move to him, nor stand the abuse she constantly receives from them. He's enraged now, but luckily for Karina, Paris enters the tent looking for the Duke just in time before he goes on to punish her. The Duke then leaves with Paris, not before reminding Karina to be at the banquet in time. Karina then leaves the tent when she's suddenly surrounded by tens of hooded men mumbling to themselves. She figures her best route of escape is through the forest, and fearing to be killed like last time, she runs into the forest with all her might. They don't follow her into the forest, as it had already become night. Now, deep in the forest, she notices a glowing blue light from the direction of the tombstone and goes there to find the text on the stone is glowing and is different from what it was during the day. Of course, Hexion appears, startling her to death, and asks her to read to him the text as well. Hexion notices Karina shivering, and so he covers her up with his cape, revealing his left arm. She stares at it, all of the rumors rushing through her head, and Hexion, on noticing this, asks her if there's anything she finds interesting in his left arm, and surprised, she just tells him she's curious. Thus, he takes her hand and places it on his arm, shocking her as she feels it's hard as rock. He asks her if she's afraid, but she gently touches his hand again and tells him no, making him smile. This makes Hexion amazed at her, as his numb hand felt her fingers touching him. He also connects her to a figure he's been seeing recently in his dreams. Karina goes back to deciphering the message on the tombstone while Hexion sits back and watches her. The new message talks about the dangers of the forest at night and how the forest master wakes then. It also talks about something the author disclosed to the world that he tried to retrieve but failed, which is suggested to be a very powerful and dangerous weapon if placed in the wrong hands. It also says that the Fulheim Forest only accepts righteous people at night, as it becomes very dangerous for those who aren't. Both Hexion and Karina seem to be quite intrigued by the writing. Hexion's staring at Karina's smiling face, and when she asks him if anything's wrong, he simply tells her that she looks beautiful when smiling, leaving her speechless. Gosh, he's such a player. The awkward moment passes and Hexion reminds her that they should be returning now, as the banquet's about to end. Karina becomes a bit uneasy by the fact, as she remembers the Duke's warning about not being late, but Hexion, at noticing her nervousness, offers to return together and use him as an excuse, which should alleviate her burden. Back in the Bifta residency, it's only been a day since they returned from the forest, and Karina wakes up to Belle telling her that Hexion has been waiting for her over an hour, though she didn't wake her, as he had told her to let her sleep in. Karina is a bit embarrassed to face him as she has a nasty bruise on her cheek. But she hurries to get ready nonetheless, not wanting to make him wait any further. Karina is severe on the maids she hears gossiping about Hexion, having completely lost the patience she had all those years. As she should. She then enters the room he's waiting in and apologizes for her tardiness. He asks her about her complexion, but she just brushes it off. And in return, she asks him if he heard any rumors about her from the servants while waiting, but he also brushes them off. Karina finally asks him why he came all the way there, and lo and behold, he asks her to marry him. Karina at first thinks he's joking, but he looks dead serious. He then asks her, whispering, if she's being abused by the Bifta, and stunned, Karina turns her face away from him, denying his allegations. However, he's persistent, noting all the time she showed signs of abuse, and even telling her he knows the bruise on her cheek was caused by the Duke after she was late for the banquet. He tells her he can protect her from them, and she doesn't have to lie for them anymore. She asks him what he would gain from this, but he just tells her that being beside her would be enough. Nonetheless, Karina doesn't want to get involved with him, fearing that she will get tied to the name Karina Bifta, and also fearing that the same thing that happened last time around will repeat itself. She doesn't want to be shackled into continuing to be Karina by this marriage to him. So she declines his offer, even though she can't help tears welling up her eyes. He apologizes for having rushed things and tells her he doesn't expect a response right away. Next day comes and he comes to visit her again, but this time he's sitting down for breakfast with the Bifta family. Usually, Karina has her breakfast after the Biftas and they never wait for her. Now that Hexion is there, he wouldn't start until she appeared, and thus the rest of the family wouldn't dare touch their food, making them furious at her when she finally did appear. While having breakfast, the Duchess asks the Grand Duke why he came so early in the morning, but he just ignores her, directing his attention only to a very uncomfortable Karina. The Duchess continues insisting, becoming more furious with each repetition, and finally, Hexion asks her what she said. The Duchess is fuming, and so she asks him why he's behaving so disrespectfully, to which he tells her it's his choice to behave as he pleases. He also tells them he came to propose to Karina, as he'd done the day prior, surprising everyone present. Karina again sternly refuses his offer, surprising everyone even further. Later, as Hexion's leaving, Karina asks him not to come during breakfast and mount a scene like that again, and he seems to understand. Obviously, she knows the Duchess will retaliate on her once he's gone, and immediately after he departs, Karina is called into the Duchess's chambers. There, an enraged Duchess slaps Karina across the face and starts pulling her hair, telling her that just because she's got Hexion's attention, she won't become more than she is now, calling her worthless. Karina sympathizes with her as she recognizes the Duchess's anger is really towards the Duke, and she takes it out on her, as she was the result of the Duke's affair. Karina tells her so, leaving the Duchess speechless and making her stop her hitting. The Duke kept coming every day of the week at different times of the day, but never again during breakfast. Looks like he got the wrong message from Karina. Every day he proposes, and every day Karina refuses him, but each time, rather than getting more discouraged, the effect on him is quite the opposite. He's been acting more and more harshly towards the Duchess, most probably after seeing Karina's bruises, which quite pleases Karina. Once, he even mentions her bruised face at the dining table, referring to it like swollen bread, but everyone there knows what he's talking about. Finally, the day of their meeting to go to the forest comes, and Karina goes to wait for him outside earlier than she expected him to arrive, as she didn't even want to risk the chance of bumping into Kuarn if he arrived in the morning as well. To her surprise, she finds Hexion already waiting for her, and as he waited for 2.5 hours out in the cold, his whole body is freezing. Karina insists that they find a place to warm up and leave after that. But he refuses, telling her he's too excited to go to the forest with her. He even cutely boasts about making lunch for them both and not sleeping because he stayed up preparing everything for their lunch. Honestly, this man is too much. Karina still suggests they warm up before leaving, but the Grand Duke asks her to get going, telling her it's because he's excited, but in truth, he's noticing some hooded figures lurking nearby and watching them. They arrive at the second tombstone of the Fulheim Forest, and as they are descending the horse, Hexion asks Karina if her guards are coming with them, which she denies. He's cleverly trying to deduce who the men following them are without making her worry. He's extremely excited to show Karina everything he prepared for her, and so they have a picnic in front of the tombstone. He made an obscene amount of sandwiches with diverse fillings, and Karina notices how neatly done every single one of them is. He's honestly too cute. She takes a bite and is amazed by its nice flavor. He also gives her some apple wine, and she's amazed by its richness too. The Duke is also fishing for compliments with starry eyes. Gosh, he's too wholesome. He then asks Karina if her family is good to her, already knowing the answer, and tells her that she can go to him anytime if she needs to. He also points out how she still doesn't call him by his name, but rather calls him Lord or Sir Hexion instead, telling her he knows it's because she still hasn't told him her own name. He's really sharp. They finish eating, and Karina gets down to business to decipher the new tombstone. She starts narrating the story, and just as the Grand Duke's about to tell her he really likes her, she vanishes into thin air. Hexion is desperately calling out to her, noting that there haven't been any signs of teleportation magic or anything like that. Much to our surprise, Karina is right there next to Hexion with a blue glow around her. She first thinks he's playing a joke on her, but after she tries touching him and is blocked by a sort of force field, she realizes something else must be going on that doesn't allow Hexion to see nor hear her. She sees she can touch other things, but she's unable to reach him. On noticing her blue glow, she concludes the solution must lie on the tombstone, so she gets down to deciphering it as fast as she can. She fears Hexion will leave the tombstone place in search of her, rendering her defenseless if night would fall and wild animals were to attack her again. She reads on the stone that the place of the forest is called the hallucination space, as it causes illusions only on humans, turning them into a supernatural existence. Hexion is still calling out to her, but amidst his worry, he slows down for a second to think and remembers that part of the forest is known to have random disappearances. He also remembers a scroll he read written by a man who reappeared from the forest. He comes to the conclusion Karina is still out there with him in the same space and can't communicate, and so he says out loud that he'll wait for her there until she deciphers the tombstone and reappears. Even though he believes she's there, as he can feel her calming presence on his body, Hexion is still quite nervous, obviously. Karina then devotes herself fully to deciphering the tombstone, wanting to get it done as fast as possible. As she's doing so, she hears a voice talking to her, and is dumbstruck after seeing a small winged glowing creature talking to her. She asks her if she's a fairy, and the being responds that she is. She asks her what she's doing in the borderland, also asking her if she's ever been there before. Karina tells her it's her first time, and the fairy also notes that the tombstone appears to be protecting her. She remembers another human that was able to go in and out of the borderland as he pleased, the same who wrote the tombstones, a man named Huxenlight. Karina is shocked to hear this, as there are many great legends about this man's role during the foundation of the empire. It's said he was a close friend to the first emperor, and that he defeated a lot of beasts and demons to be able to make the land habitable for humans. The fairy then tells Karina she'll help her return to the human world if she's able to decipher the whole tombstone. Karina agrees, and she spends the whole day furiously writing down everything on the tombstone onto her notepad. At dusk, she finally completes the tombstone's translation, telling the fairy it's done. The fairy asks her to read it to her, but Karina protests as it would take too long to do that. However, the fairy can't talk nor read human language, informing Karina that they've been speaking fairy language all throughout. Instead, the fairy offers her another deal, telling her that if she reads the tombstone to her, she'll make Hexion fall in love with her. Karina blushes at the fairy's offer. The fairy tells her she can make anyone fall in love with her, and Karina is quite astounded, and a bit scared, of how easily they seem to be able to manipulate people's minds. She refuses the offer, surprising the fairy. Karina just gives in to reading it, but first makes her promise not to get mad at what she hears. So, she starts reading to her. Huxenlight talks about fairies, saying that they can be cruel, and some of them even delight in human suffering. Humans who go into the fairy realm are called trespassers, and he says they can return to the human world either by touching another human or by eating something from the human world. Similarly, they can also enter the fairy realm by eating some fairy plants that are found in the human realm. It also says that once a human's been in the fairy realm, they'll be able to see fairies even when they are not in it. Additionally, it says that befriending a fairy will probably make them help you out, and if someone deciphers all of the tombstones, they will either be granted a wish, if they befriended a fairy, or they gain access to the fairy forest. There's also a personal note from Huxenlight, on which he talks of his regret of having lied to the fairies by telling them he would spend all of eternity with them. And this seems to upset the fairy a bit, making Karina think maybe she was close to Huxenlight. Once done reading, the fairy flies towards Karina and tells her that she'll give her a reward for having read it to her. Before she can even ask what reward, the fairy blows some glow-in dust on Karina's eyes. Karina feels as though there's something in her eyes, but the feeling subsides. The fairy also warns her not to use her healing powers on humans, confusing Karina a bit. Karina then grabs a sandwich and starts eating it, wanting to return to the human realm. As soon as she takes a bite, the blue glow starts fading and Hexion is able to see her. He immediately grabs her hand, showing how worried he was. She notices she can finally touch him, and so she starts touching him all over in marvel, obviously making him blush hard. She falls into his arms, exhausted from her time in the fairy realm and having had to decipher the tombstone so quickly. She's still a bit shocked to know about the existence of fairies, but even more so, she is scared by it. So she'd rather not have anything to do with them ever again. Much to her disappointment, she immediately notices she's still able to see and hear the fairy, who's now talking to her. She tells her it's because of the dust she blew into her eyes, which allows her not only to see fairies, but everything magical around her. Karina is terrified. The fairy seems to think she gave her a wonderful gift, but to Karina, who wishes to have nothing to do with the magical world, this is more so of a curse. Upon noticing her displeasure of her gift, the fairy becomes angry and a strong gust of wind starts blowing out of the blue. Hexion covers her with his body, as something suddenly flew right into her direction and was about to impact her. Luckily, the fairy quickly calms down and the wind stops. However, Hexion's left arm became exposed because of it, showing a stone-like arm. As soon as he realizes, he flinches and hurries to cover it with his cape, apologizing to Karina. The fairy also sees it and tells Karina it was caused by bile poison, telling Karina that with time, she would probably be able to heal it. Karina is still confused as to what the fairy is talking about, so she explains that the tombstone gave her the power to heal. Karina asks her how she can access that power, but the fairy only remembers Huxenlight saying something about having to have the desire to heal. Then, Karina also asks her if she can remove the blessing she gave her that allows her to see the magic around her. Offended, the fairy says it's too late for that now and starts telling her about the benefits seeing magic has. Karina's still not convinced, but there's nothing she can do about it now. The fairy also tells her that the more tombstones she deciphers, the stronger her power will get, and that the key to using it is probably in a tombstone as well. With that, she disappears. Hexion asks Karina who she's been talking to, and she tells him a fairy. He seems to buy it from the get-go, not needing any further explanations. What a strange fellow he is. Karina asks him about his hand while approaching him. He turns his face away ashamed, telling her it's not contagious. Poor guy. She asks to see it again, and he asks her if she's not disgusted by it. But she reassures him, telling him it's okay. He uncovers it for her, becoming really vulnerable in front of her eyes when he admits it does hurt. She takes his stone hand into her own, wanting to heal him, when suddenly, his arm starts glowing. Hexion's arm starts turning back into normal skin, and while she was touching him, Hexion was also able to feel with his fingers. He's completely astounded by this, and Karina explains what the fairy had told her about her healing abilities. Still in shock, Hexion asks her if she'll help him even though he's infected with Scarlet disease, the same disease which is forcing her into her awful family situation. Karina is flabbergasted. How does he know about her true origins? He starts telling her what he knows, that the Imperial family and the Bifta family have a strong alliance, and how, 10 years ago, the Duke went to the Emperor to beg him to find a doctor that would cure his daughter from the Scarlet disease. He also says he knows about the disease's true nature. Then, he goes on to tell her that their marriage has been arranged 10 years ago when she was first adopted by the Biftas, telling her it's a political marriage that the Emperor proposed in exchange for ignoring the fact that the real Karina had died of Scarlet disease and accepting her as her replacement. Karina is horrified to hear that this has been cooking since she first came into the Bifta family, realizing that she won't be able to escape and live freely once the younger daughter is born, and wondering even more so why she was killed in the first place. Hexian tells her he relates to her, as he also looked for the Emperor's love and suffered in return when drinking the poison the very Emperor gave him. He tells her she can cry in front of him, but Karina refuses to cry anymore because of the Biftas. Hexian is amazed by her strength, noticing how she's even stronger than he is. He then goes on to tell her his story, confiding in her that he actually is an illegitimate child of the Emperor, and all of his life he has had to beg for his life to the Emperor. He was thrown away and neglected, and now he still has to beg the Emperor for his life as there's a medicine he needs to take every 6 hours to stay alive because of the Scarlet disease. He tells her he now wants to turn the tables and asks for Karina's help, telling her that when he's with her, he can skip on taking the medicine and he'll still be healthy. Hexian also tells her that this would help her too, as he knows there's a plan being hacked by the Emperor to kill her and blame the Duke, that the Bifta family is under his control in order to prevent them from gaining too much power. Karina is astonished at this news, thinking that maybe she wasn't killed by the Duke after all. Hexian also asks Karina to tell him her real name, but she's still very reserved about it. He then suggests Karina uses him to take revenge on her enemies, and Karina asks him if the only reason he proposed marriage to her was because she was useful to him. However, he looks at her honestly, squeezing her hand, and tells her that ever since meeting her, he's been enthralled by her, feeling miserable whenever they are apart. Karina is a bit uncomfortable by his words, not knowing how to feel about them. She's wary of trusting him, which is to be expected given the environment she was raised in and, well, the fact she died before because of trusting the Duke. In any case, she thinks maybe her actions might be having an effect on changing her future, so she ventures into telling him her real name, Adele. Side note, from now on, I'll be referring to her as Adele rather than Karina. She asks Hexian how she can start helping him, and he immediately says that by marrying him, even if it's temporary until they get rid of their enemies. He promises he'll protect her and give her freedom, and after a moment's thought, she finally agrees. The Grand Duke gets so excited, he immediately hugs her. But Adele is quite uncomfortable by this still, and so he quickly lets her go, excusing himself and blushing super hard. Adele then returns to the matter of translating the tombstone, now wanting to translate the message that glows at night as she's able to read it during the day because of the fairy's blessing. While she's translating, Hexian falls asleep. She quickly finishes and waits for him to wake up, which doesn't take long. She suggests they return to their residencies, and Hexian asks her if she wouldn't like to run away, as the ducal residency is not a comfortable place for her. He even tells her she can stay at his residency, making Adele blush. She finds him really silly and insists that they just go back to their respective residencies, and wishing she can get to trust him. Adele puts on a hooded cape to go to the back streets of the capital, where she grew up. Hexian had told her they needed an informant to keep up to date with the Emperor's plans, and to his surprise, Adele told him she knew of someone who could help. Now undercover and in the back streets, she finds a young boy that reminds her of her younger self. He plays the role of a tough kid, but Adele bribes him with some golden coins while asking him about a man named Jin. She tells him she's a friend of his, but the kid still refuses to let her see him. Nonetheless, she gives him more coins and he gives in, telling her to come back the next day at the same time. Upon noticing more hungry children, Adele gives the kid the whole bag of coins, telling him it's a bribe. The next day, Adele goes back again into the back alleys and finds the young kid. He tells her Jin said he had no friends, and Adele starts to panic, trying to figure out what to tell the kid to convince him otherwise, when a man talks to her from behind her back, and she immediately recognizes him as Jin. He approaches her, telling her he thought she died, and then takes her hand to lead her to a safer place where they can talk. All while holding her hand, Jin takes Adele through numerous hidden passageways until finally, they emerge at the center of the capital, leaving Adele perplexed. They enter a building belonging to the Information Guild, where Jin leads her into a huge office where he orders an errand boy to make tea for both of them. Adele's really surprised to see how far Jin has come, as she knows this sort of office isn't given to just anybody. Jin tries to make her feel as comfortable as possible, asking her to sit down, and even engulfing her in a huge scarf, thinking she may be cold. A hilarious scene happens where Jin starts messing around with the scarf as Adele tells him it's too hot. I mean, I'm already kind of obsessed with Hexion, but I gotta tell you, this handsome fellow is so cute. Adele asks him what made him think she was dead, and he tells her 2 other boys, Jack and Cal, had told him they saw a drowned body be taken from the river, and gave them a leather bracelet he had given her as proof that it was she who had drowned. Adele is appalled, as she tells him that in fact what had happened was that those 2 boys had sold her. Of course, Jin becomes enraged upon hearing this. The errand boy comes back with a cart full of refreshments, and as they have their tea, Adele tells him in detail how Jack and Cal sold her. She asks him if they're still alive, but he tells her they died recently, leaving her aghast. Apparently, they were found beaten to shreds, and Jin tells her with a cold look that it seems someone had a very strong grudge against them. He excuses himself for some bit as he has to take care of some work stuff, but returns quite fast and asks a ninja-looking hooded man to refill the refreshments. Adele is still surprised he can order around so many men, wondering how the past 10 years looked for him. He asks her how she's doing, but of course, she can't tell him the whole truth. As she's running out of time, she tells him directly that she needs a huge favor from him, which may cost him his life and put the guild in danger, as it could involve treason. Jin is shocked, asking her if someone's forcing her into that situation. Sternly, she tells him that it's her own choice, and she's not working alone. Jin agrees to meet her again, along with her accomplice. She tells him she has to go back home now, but he hastily tells her she can stay there, holding her face while telling her this was supposed to be her home. Okay? Guess we've got a lot to unpack there. Adele says goodbye to Jin and heads back to the ducal residency. As soon as she leaves, Jin instructs some more hooded men to keep a close eye on her and to find out what she's been up to the past 10 years, telling them to be careful, not to be noticed by her nor the royal family. One of them asks him about some men they have locked up in the basement, and he tells them he'll check on them. Adele's returned to the ducal residency, where she notices that, fortunately, nobody noticed her being gone, as Kuarn has finally arrived. She decides to go lock herself in her room until dawn, where she'll prepare some lunches to take with her into her room once more. She wishes to avoid meeting Kuarn as much as possible. As she enters her room, she finds a sack with red stains in the middle of the floor, and horrified, she remembers Kuarn had also brought that last time around, wanting to torment her. She doesn't wish to be tormented by him again, so she takes it out and locks her room and windows. Moments later, chaos sounds from outside her door as Bella found it and looked at its contents. She's then yelled at by Kuarn, who begins banging on Adele's door, demanding she comes out. She decides to ignore him as much as possible, hiding under her covers. Poor girl. I wish I could hug her right now. Right before Kuarn administers a harsh blow on Adele's door, which would have probably knocked it down, the Duke appears and stops him mid-track. Kuarn pleads to the Duke, telling him he's just trying to get her out of her room as she never went down to see him. The Duke knocks on her door and, receiving no response, he tells Kuarn to stop it and go downstairs, that they'll see her the next day. Kuarn's a lunatic. He blows down Adele's door with his magic and approaches her in her bed. She plays it off as if she'd just woken up, but Kuarn doesn't believe her and tries to place his hand on her head. She slaps it away, telling him to get out as she's tired. He asks her what she'd do if he didn't get out, and decidedly, she tells him she'll then leave herself, ordering Bella to prepare a room for her. She tries to stand, but Kuarn uses his magic to immobilize her, lifting her from the ground. Thanks to the fairy's blessing, Adele's able to see red strings flowing from Kuarn, and remembering the fairy's words, she figures they must be Kuarn's magic. She touches one of the strings and the magic breaks off, letting her go and making her fall to the ground. Kuarn is shocked, asking her how she can block his magic. She doesn't want to raise his nor the Duke's suspicion, so she tells him she did nothing. Kuarn, annoyed, then lifts her up again, but now makes her hover outside the window. The Duke tells him to stop his joke, but Kuarn tells Adele he'll let her in when she apologizes. However, Adele cuts the strings and falls again, telling him she'd rather die. Luckily, Adele fell into a pond that's found right beneath her window. As soon as she lands, though, Kuarn pulls her out of the water. He asks her if she's okay, placing a hand on her shoulder, but she furiously slaps it off. She stands and, looking down on him, tells him he's the worst kind of person in the world and she can't stand him. He's surprised and eventually amused by her newfound strength. Bella rushes towards her with towels, but Adele yells at her to stay away, telling everyone in the house she hates them. Go, girl! The Duke then appears, asking her in the most fake tone ever if she's hurt. She decides to tell them all now that she'll marry Hexion, surprising everyone. Kuarn tries to step between her and the Duke, wanting to convince him not to allow it. But as we know, this marriage has been arranged by the Duke as soon as he got her. The Duke turns around to leave, telling her he'll take care of the arrangements, but Adele stops him. She says decidedly that she'll arrange everything herself, even calling him Duke rather than father. This even shocks Kuarn, and the Duke orders someone to bring him a cigar, telling her he's gonna educate her. He threatens to burn her face, and Adele stays still with a horrified look on her face. The Duke then retreats, recommending she keeps her mouth shut until she leaves them. The Duke orders Bella to lock Adele up in a room in the middle of the second floor of the mansion, telling her to feed her every 2 days like they used to. It seems they used to lock her up quite often when she was younger. She used to be so scared and feel so guilty, thinking it had been something she'd done wrong that led her there. Those abusive pricks. Now, with the blessing from the fairy, she's able to see inside the pitch-dark room, whilst before she used to stumble around aimlessly in the dark for days. A week goes by, and the Grand Duke arrives at the ducal residency to meet with the Duke and discuss their marriage arrangements. They meet, and while both being passive-aggressive towards one another, the Duke informs Hexion that he'll discuss the details with him and then report to the king. Hexion tells him that he'd rather discuss these details with Adele than with him, but the Duke puts on excuses about her absence, saying she's feeling unwell and she'd rather not have him see her. However, Hexion will not give up so easily, as he already knows them and notices something smelling fishy. With an air of superiority, he reminds the Duke he's not asking to see her, he's ordering him to take him to her. The Duke is stunned, telling him he's being impolite, but Hexion tells him he can notice he's lying about Adele's condition. The Duke tells him he'll go look for her himself, but Hexion insists he goes over to her. However, the Duke is even more insistent, telling Hexion he worries so much about his little girl that he wants to check on her himself beforehand. That lying bastard! The Duke goes to the room Adele's locked in, harshly taking a book from her hands, demanding to know if she was reading it. Adele probably was, but she just tells him she couldn't have as it's pitch black there. It seems the room they locked her in used to belong to the real Karina Bifta. The Duke informs her that Hexion is waiting downstairs for her, ordering her to dress and go see him. However, knowing Hexion, Adele knows he's probably figured something's off. She refuses the Duke's order, telling him she won't listen to any of his commands any longer, and that the doll who used to listen to him is now long gone. He's furious, raising his hand to hit her hard when, thankfully, Hexion grabs his wrist and stops him mid-act. With an enraged look in his eyes, he demands to know if he was about to hit her, and oh God, does the Duke look like he's about to poop his pants. The Duke looks at Hexion, telling him it's his role as a parent to punish his children if they do something wrong. But Hexion's not buying it. He twists his arm behind his back, telling him this abuse is not education, and reminding him that right now, he's below him in power, so he should respect him as well. Hexion completely changes his expression and asks Adele sweetly if she's all right. She tells him she is and asks him how he got there. But of course, we know he went to check on the Duke as he knew something was strange. Kuarn barges into the room, shocked to see Hexion subduing his father and grabbing his hand with all his strength. However, Hexion doesn't even flinch. He shoves the Duke away. Kuarn foolishly tries to punch him in the face, but of course, Hexion dodges it and lifts him up from his neck, telling him to be more careful when going against someone he doesn't know. Kuarn's about to use his fire powers on him, but the Duke motions him to stop, then asking for Hexion's forgiveness for their rudeness. Hexion drops Kuarn and tells the Duke that the law allows for a couple to live together as long as their engagement is announced. So he goes on to tell him that Adele will be staying with him from then on. The Duke is shocked, and Kuarn is fuming. This will ruin the Duke's plan to prolong the engagement to make the Bifta family gain power. Hexion asks Adele what she'd like, and of course, she tells him she'll go with him, and so they leave together. The Duke tries to stop her, but Adele just turns to face him, telling him he'll regret how he mistreated her one day. Kuwarn blows off, yelling at Adele and telling her she doesn't even know him. Hexion and Adele start walking away, but Kuwarn follows them from behind, even yelling after her by her real name, but she just tells him, with a harsh look, that anything will be better than staying there with them. As they approach the door, they bump into the Duchess, who's looking at the whole situation perplexed. Adele looks down on her, telling her that, as she always wanted, she's finally leaving, and Hexion comforts Adele, even calling her his wife. And just like that, Adele leaves that awful place and doesn't look back. While on Hexion's horse, he asks her if she'd been locked up in that room. Adele tells him that they've been locking her up in there ever since she was little, increasing Hexion's internal anger towards the Bifta, realizing they've been abusing her since she was a child. He also notes she looks thinner, and so he tells her she must eat a lot once she arrives at their residency. Then, he asks how Kuwarn knew her real name, and she tells him she told him her name once when they were little, but she didn't expect him to remember it. Adele also tells him she's been reading Karina's journal when locked up, in which she recounted her pain and fear while dying of scarlet disease. Finally, they arrive at Hexion's residency. Once they arrive, the sweet head butler Orlando introduces himself. Hexion tells him something happened when he went to decide dates for the wedding, so Adele will be staying with them from now on. However, he hesitates when telling them her name, and swiftly, she introduces herself as Karina Bifta again. Nonetheless, Orlando appears to be very good at reading the room and asks her if there's a nickname she'd likes to go by. So she tells him she likes to be called Adele, and he tells her he'll call her that when they're alone. Gosh, I already love him. Orlando leads her to the room, and suddenly realizing she hasn't had a bath in a week, Adele embarrassedly asks if she can have a bath. He tells her he'll make the arrangements and shows her room, telling her Hexion has told him to look after it every day, not knowing when she'd finally be fed up and run away. Adele thanks him, and Orlando asks her to talk to him more informally. He's really the sweetest. Once Adele's showered and changed, Hexion knocks on her door to tell her dinner's ready. She asks him why he came himself instead of having someone else call her, so he tells her that her presence is calming to him and even makes breathing easier, which makes Adele glad. While going to the dining room, Adele asks him where his room is, and he tells her it's on the first floor. Finding this strange, she asks him why, and he just tells her that it will get loud at night. There's a feast laid out on the table, and as they're eating, Adele asks him why he keeps his gloves on even while he's in his own home. He tells her that he doesn't want to make anybody uncomfortable, informing her that the people who work there are there because of the high salary and not because they want to. Adele doesn't agree with Hexion, as by looking at how properly done everything is, she does think the workers there are there of their own accord. In any case, Hexion asks her if there's anything she needs from the ducal residence, as they went away too fast to even grab a bag of her things. She asks him if someone can be sent to pick up her things, but he tells her she doesn't have to have anything of the Bifta anymore, that he can buy her everything she wants. She refuses, telling him she already owes him so much, but he explains to her that not even the most expensive medicine is as effective on his pain as she is. Once dinner is over, they part ways, and as soon as Adele's a few steps away from him, Hexion starts feeling a piercing pain all throughout his body, realizing that the medicine is only making it worse and making him more dependent on it. He collapses on his bed, sweating from the pain. Sometime later, Adele is turning in her bed and she can't sleep. She decides to go fetch a glass of water, and as she walks past the Grand Duke's bedroom door, she hears his grunts of pain. She barges in, seeing him crumpled in pain on the bed. Hastily, she goes to his side and takes his hand, wanting to be able to heal him immediately. As she wishes for it, a blue light starts glowing from her hands. Hexion had a reoccurring nightmare. He's masked, and most of his body has already turned to stone thanks to the scarlet disease. He's rushing on his horse through a rainy forest, thinking he should have brought her sooner and not waited for preparations to be over. Before he can get wherever he's heading, he feels his body start to crumble, and as he's dying, he makes a wish to someone to protect her this time. More than a nightmare, it looks like he's remembering his past life. He wakes up and finds Adele sleeping while sitting next to his bed and holding his hand. He wakes her up and thanks her for helping him, but she scolds him for not having gone to her sooner. However, he doesn't want to become too greedy of her, as he wants to keep his promise of letting her go freely whenever she chooses. Hexion then tells her he'll go to the capital to talk to the Emperor about their marriage and get some medicine. telling her he might be gone for a couple of days. She worries for him, as she knows the Emperor is abusive of him too, but he reassures her that he'll be fine. Before going, he asks her for one more favor, to hug her once. He thinks it'll be more effective than holding hands, and even though blushing hard, she accepts. Adele's two new maids, Frey and Julie, are also very sweet towards her. Frey seemed to be very worried for her after seeing she wasn't in her room, and Adele explains she went to visit Hexion, relieving Frey. As Adele's bathing, Frey talks great things about Hexion. This makes Adele smile as she sees Hexion is surrounded by great people. They have breakfast together with Hexion, and she tells him about what she translated from the second tombstone. She warns him that they should retrieve the notebook from the duchy, as she thinks it would be troublesome if the Duke were to read it. The stone talks of a disease with the same symptoms as scarlet disease, which spread during the foundation of the empire. There was a tree that made a crying sound, and curious about what was trapped inside, they cut it, releasing the thing that was crying and causing the epidemic. The first emperor seems to have used this to his advantage, as he gained power by becoming the savior of the people, being able to cure the disease. Hexion tells Adele that the same thing may be happening with the current emperor, telling her that he contracted the disease after the emperor exposed him to a poison. He seems to be the only one with medicine that can stop its advances, and only noble families that would come in the way of his plans appear to contract the disease. They decide to go look for the third tombstone after his return. Hexion arrives at the Imperial Palace, but is unfortunate enough to bump into the dreaded Crown Prince Khalid. At first, the prince insults the Grand Duke nastily. Not one to back down, Hexion claps back by pointing out that he is once again letting his inferiority complex get the better of him. It is evident that the prince simply wants the Emperor's attention. Before turning away, the Grand Duke does not hesitate to threaten the Crown Prince of losing his position as well as his head for his petty jealousy. Khalid is left desperately wondering why his father pays more attention to his illegitimate child than his actual heir. Hexion eventually comes face to face with his sinister father. After politely greeting him, he is ordered to sit down. The Emperor first comments on his health before pointing out the actions he had taken without permission, specifically taking Duke Bifta's daughter. Knowing that the Emperor is testing him, the Duke states how much his actions were motivated by love at first sight. Surprisingly honest, Hexion reveals how he felt about Adele, especially when she touched his hand. He then requests that he and Adele be engaged and be allowed to live together. Since the Emperor has been planning to marry them anyway, he of course agrees, especially since it's the first time his son requested anything of him. Being addressed so familiarly by the Emperor makes Hexion tremble in disgust. This is understandable, considering how much of a dreadful person the Emperor is. Anyone would tremble because of his evilness. However, he wants to hold a ball to announce the engagement, and despite Hexion's protest, the Emperor insists on pushing through with it. Suddenly, the Emperor reaches out to remove Hexion's gloves, revealing his left hand. Mockingly, he advises Hexion to let the bride see his hand before the wedding, otherwise the lady might run away. Hexion knows that it is better that the Emperor thinks that Adele hasn't seen his condition yet, so he lets him believe what he wants. When the Emperor comments about Hexion's medicine, a sudden pain attacks Hexion's body. Meanwhile, the Emperor has a sinister look on his face as he watches his son writhing in pain. He then demands that the two of them talk for a while. Ugh! My hatred for this guy is impossible to contain! Meanwhile, Adele is getting worried since Hexion is yet to return from his trip to see the Emperor. She worries about the possibility of the Emperor worsening his condition. She can't even eat the snacks brought to her by Frey because of how anxious she is. Later on, as she makes her way to the library, the peace is suddenly disturbed due to a ruckus downstairs. When she takes a look, she is greeted by the sight of Kuarn, throwing a tantrum, demanding to see her. She faces him, asking him what he's doing. This guy then tells her that she may think that she's special now. He even tells her that she's living with a monster. This guy is totally getting on my nerves. Leave her alone, mister! Your bullying needs to end! Adele is quick to defend her fiancé, and even when Kuarn insults her by calling her shameless, she stands her ground. She tells him that he is the one being shameless as well as being disrespectful. This only annoys Kuarn, telling her to come home for she may not handle their father's wrath. Adele makes it clear that the place is not her home, which only outrages Kuarn. However, Adele reveals that the Duke may have raised her to live like a noble, but in return, he dangles her life around as if it were his own. She vows that she would rather wander in the streets and live her life than rather die at the hands of their so-called father. Hearing this from her shocks Kuarn. He clearly doesn't know how much their father abuses Adele. With a stern look on her face, she demands that he go home to the duchy where it is safe. Kuarn is in disbelief, thinking that she may have misunderstood something. Adele replies that as a legitimate son, he won't understand what she has gone through. Looking straight at him, she conveys how she hates his violence and how she never wants to see him again. Kuarn then can no longer take it, so he blurts out how wrong she is. She exposes that he has never been a Bifta, and the two of them are similar for they're both temporary. Adele is confused by Kuarn's sudden state of weakness. How can Kuarn not be the Duke's son when he looks exactly like the Duchess? OMG! Was he horrible to her so she paid attention to him? Being vulnerable is clearly something Kuarn is not comfortable with. So with another bout of anger, Kuarn lashes out and uses his magic to create an explosion. Poor Orlando, who is nearby, is injured because of him. Kuarn demands that Adele come down, otherwise he will destroy the entire house. Adele is frantically trying to stop him when a cold and rigid voice is heard. The Grand Duke has arrived, and saying that he is not happy is an understatement. He demands to know why the duchy's dog has crawled into his house and caused a commotion. Oh, Hexion will not take your little tantrum lightly, Kuarn. One thing is for sure, though, the Grand Duke is quite creative with his insults. After checking if Adele is unharmed, Hexion takes in the damage that Kuarn has done to his people before punching him straight in the face. Hot-headed as ever, Kuarn is angered, channeling his powers once again to retaliate. Fortunately, Adele can clearly see the magic he is using, and before Hexion is hit by Kuarn's magic, she warns him to dodge to the left so he can avoid it. The two men are left trying to comprehend how Adele has managed to see that. Kuarn demands how she did it, but Adele is enraged that he's focusing on this when he literally attacked someone just moments ago. Kuarn angrily pointed out that he was attacked first. Hexion does not take this lightly, so he grabs Kuarn and lifts him in the air, threatening to kill him. To his surprise, Kuarn cryptically states that Hexion is the one who stole her first. Wait a second, this guy is so confusing even Hexion is confused. You shouldn't have tormented her if you wanted to be close to her. Before things can escalate, Adele touches Hexion's arms to stop him, convincing him that it is enough. And because our Hexion is so whipped, he obeys her without hesitation. He lets go of Kuarn and informs him that their engagement has already been approved, so no one can no longer interfere. Kuarn is clearly upset and enraged by this, but he knows he can do nothing. Before he leaves, he turns to Adele with a look that expresses deep sadness. Hexion once again ensures that Adele is all right. She assures him that she's fine and expresses more concern for Orlando. She apologizes for Kuarn's actions, but Hexion states that it is he who should apologize for scaring her. Adele observes that the Grand Duke's condition seems to be worsening, so she caresses his cheek to check for a fever. Meanwhile, Hexion blushes like a teenager due to her gentle touch. His heart even picks up its pace, which only worries Adele more. Unbeknownst to her, the reason for his current state is not exactly what she thinks it is. Gosh, he is so obvious! Mr. Grand Duke, your feelings are showing! When she tells him to rest, he shyly requests that she stay by his side for a bit. After all, he deems her company better than lying around and resting. Adele is flustered, but she nods anyway, making the Grand Duke extremely happy. Well, what can we say? The Grand Duke sure has a soft spot for Adele. Later on, our two lovebirds meet up on the terrace. Adele takes his left hand and starts subjecting it to her healing magic while she expresses concern for his well-being after his trip to the Imperial Palace. He tries to downplay what happened, but she can see through his lies. She knows that things did not turn out well during his visit. Hexion then informs her that the Emperor wants to hold a ball for their engagement. In spite of her fear, Adele bravely accepts their fate and wants to prepare for the dreaded event. I know that this will not end well. I want our couple to stay away from that evil incarnate as much as possible. Naturally, Hexion is worried for Adele, for not only will the Emperor be there, but the Duke will be as well. Adele, on the other hand, is more worried about him. She is willing to help him in any way she can. They are so protective of each other. They are literally the ultimate couple goals. Adele then notices that his condition has improved just by her touch. Even his fever has gone down. Hexion thinks that he will be fine soon, so he suggests going to the third monolith together. However, she worries that he is not taking care of himself properly. She mentions how they risk everything in their agreement. Hexion is taken aback by her mentioning the agreement. He solemnly asks her if he has done something to displease her, vowing to change if he did offend her. He assumes that she wants to end their agreement. Adele is confused by this, not understanding why he would think that she wants to end their relationship. She teases him by implying that it is actually him who wants to end their agreement. Hexion is quick to deny this allegation, confessing that he even wants her to stay by his side if possible. When he realizes what he just said, it's too late. The two of them end up looking like a couple of tomatoes just staring at each other. Hexion is struggling to explain what he just said. He is blushing like crazy, and Adele worries that his temperature will spike again. So she explains that she simply meant that she doesn't want to endanger him because he is important to her. She vows to always help him, begging him not to lie alone sick at night anymore. Adele is so sweet. No wonder Hexion is falling for her hard, without a parachute or any harness. The guy is all in, I tell you. That night, Hexion wakes to see a sleeping Adele holding onto his left hand by his bed. He knows that she is uncomfortable in her position, so he decides to get her on the bed. However, he suddenly realizes that he can move his left hand. Although not to its full capacity, this is still nothing short of a miracle, all because of Adele. Hexion stares at her sleeping face, and he wonders when his feelings have started growing. He fears that his curse will only bring greater misfortune to Adele, who is trying to escape her own shackles in life. The next morning, Adele wakes with a start when she realizes that she is not in her room. Hexion explains that he placed her there last night and even suggests that she lay down on the bed if she gets sleepy in the future as well. However, the thought of lying down next to Hexion embarrasses her so much that she hides under the blanket. You better get used to it, Adele. You're getting married after all. Hexion, lively as ever, then suggests that they look for the monolith that day. Adele wants him to rest for another day, but he reminds her that they are running out of time, especially since the banquet is next week. Adele eventually concedes, but not before making the Grand Duke promise not to strain himself. Eventually, the two set out on their journey to find the monolith. They are discussing the possibility of actually camping out when a familiar voice butts into their conversation. It is Kuarn. What is this dude doing third-wheeling on their date? The meddlesome Kuarn demands to know what they are up to. When they question his presence, he claims that the place is not the Grand Duke's domain, so he can do as he pleases. Hexion makes it known that the area is, in fact, still part of his domain. He then declares that Kuarn is an intruder in his and Adele's date, demanding that he retreat now instead of getting between lovers. But still, he follows the couple around, but Hexion pays him no mind, claiming that he is simply too exhausting to deal with. However, one thought is stuck in Hexion's mind. Why is Kuarn so obsessed with Adele? When they reach a certain point, they dismount since it is time for them to go on foot. Unfortunately, Kuarn is still trailing behind them, wanting to know what they are doing. Annoyed, Adele tells him to go home. With a shrug, Kuarn once again claims that he is merely taking a stroll. They walk for a while before they realize that they've been walking for 20 minutes, and yet they haven't seen anything. Hexion decides to set a marker before they continue walking. However, they are once again interrupted by Kuarn's endless meddling. Adele finally has had enough and snaps at him for troubling them. Kuarn angrily retorts that it is because she refuses to speak to him. We'll ever wonder why? Because you're bullying her! Hexion then does not hesitate to throw a stone past Kuarn's head to shut him up, barely missing him by an inch. With an evil glint in his eyes, Hexion then innocently claims that his hand merely slipped. Thus, another heated conflict is about to begin between these two. Not wanting to look like a coward, Kuarn challenges Hexion to a fist fight rather than using his magic. But then, Hexion easily catches his fist when he throws his first blow, reminding him that he is no match to him in hand-to-hand combat. Kuarn becomes increasingly frustrated, and Hexion mocking him only makes it worse. The Grand Duke whispers to him that this isn't how he can get the attention he wants so badly. See, even the Grand Duke knows that this dude has some pretty complicated feelings about our Adele. Once again, Kuarn is incensed by Hexion's words, throwing another punch at him. Only this time, Hexion does not dodge the blow, and it hits him square in his face. Adele hurriedly goes to his side, checking his injury. Kuarn sees the way the Grand Duke smirks in his direction. He knows that the man did that on purpose. He tries explaining this to Adele, but she is more concerned with the Duke. She then angrily faces him, questioning why he can't ever control his temper. Kuarn even tries to reason that he was hurt too, but the couple is already so immersed in one another to notice his plight. OMG, I kind of feel sorry for Kuarn now. Why is he so pitiful? Kuarn grits his teeth and mutters how Adele is making quite a big fuss over nothing. Surprisingly, he throws something at her, which she manages to catch. It is a first aid ointment meant to heal an injury in seconds. Even after that incident, Kawarn turns to follow them, but the two have to focus on the fact that they seem to be going in circles at this point. Kawarn actually manages to be helpful by telling them rumors about the place. It is said that no matter how deep you go, you'll keep returning to the same place. Some bandits were apparently trying to move their base deeper into the forest, but a few of them disappeared after dawn, only to return a full day later with faces as pale as ghosts. Adele then speculates that the place may only reveal itself at dawn. This means that they need to camp out until then. Eventually, they all sit around a bonfire to start their wait. Kawarn and Adele have a brief confrontation, but Adele can only take so much of Kawarn's attitude, so she lays down and covers her ear to block him out. Hexion then tells Kawarn that he ought to apologize for his past transgression if he wants to maintain a familial bond with Adele, but he puts it out there that he'd rather his fiancée cut ties with him altogether. Another fight is about to ensue when they are startled by a bright light. They take a look and witness the terrain transforming before them. Adele is certain that it is the right path, since she can see spiritual energy flowing down the path. They follow the path, and at the end of it, they finally see the monolith. It is already glowing, and Adele can see both the night and day inscriptions. Suddenly, they hear Kawarn calling out to them. Turns out the path closed before he can even enter. Hexion is actually quite happy that the forest took care of their intruder for them. The brute was apparently planning to knock Kawarn out before he could see the monolith. Adele is relieved that it did not come to that. Adele proceeds to decipher the inscription right away. The daytime inscription tells them that if one cannot find their way off the path, they shall simply return where they came from. So they assume that Kawarn has been repelled back to the campsite. It also warns them to be careful of the fourth monolith. As for the nighttime inscription, it continues the story of where the previous one left off. The disease mentioned seems to be called Kalot, and the story revolves around a peerless hero named Huxenlight and a low-ranked priest named Alba Bestia, who is the hero's friend. The monolith describes how they unleashed something from the forest. It also reveals that Huxenlight is actually a woman. The hero eventually decided to roam the Fulheim forest to avoid onlookers and the repetition of war. The next time she heard of Alba, he was rumored to be healing the plague with nothing but prayers and blessing. The priest claimed that the sickness is the wrath of God and that the faithful will not get ill. When others condemned him as a heretic, those people fell prey to the plague themselves. Huxenlight described how she saw the priest as a quiet and shy man, one who never lies. But she couldn't help but be suspicious of the rumor, so she leaves the forest to look for him. When they meet again, they greeted each other like old friends. Alba, who is now a grand priest, seemed like a completely different person. After catching up, Huxenlight broaches the topic of him being able to cure the plague. To her surprise, Alba claimed that apart from that, he even had a share of God's powers. He proclaimed that he can transcend the kingdom and hold the world in his palm. That is certainly a red flag. It never ends well when a single person wants to claim the whole world. What freaked her out even more was that when the priest held his hand towards her, asking her to join him, the man claimed that they could be gods together. At that moment, Alba's eyes are bright red. Huxenlight was quick to deny his request, stating that she doesn't belong there. She pointed out that the man had changed far too much. The priest was disappointed, but he let her go. However, he offered that if she changed her mind, she can come back whenever she liked. He vowed to continue to wait for her. Why are toxic guys always so manipulative? Warning bells are literally ringing all over this guy. Good thing Huxen is not easily swayed. That was the first and last conversation they had in years. She returned to the forest as swiftly as possible. She needed to know why Alba changed so much, especially since she is to blame for this situation. The thought of never seeing her old friend be his former self again shook her to the core. She never thought that losing him would hurt so much. At present, Adele feels Huxenlight's emotion like they were her own. Tears begin falling down her cheeks, and she does not understand why. She is in distress, feeling as though the things she has read are her own experiences. Hexion does not know how to comfort her. He knows that she's already exhausted from deciphering the inscription, so he fears that she will fall ill. He then wonders if she can break free from Huxenlight's emotions if he rouses her personal feelings. And so, he suddenly kisses her cheek. At first, Adele is confused, but Hexion explains that tears may stop if he aroused her. Excuse me, mister, what? That's new. The two of them are blushing like crazy. How cute! Hexion kisses her again, but this time on her lips. Whoa! This is happening, guys! They continue to lock lips for some time, and before they know it, Adele's tears have finally stopped flowing. However, they end up looking so flustered, shyly looking away from one another. Suddenly, the fairy from before appeared to tease them. Adele is surprised to see Miss Fairy, but the naughty little fairy has actually been following them. The fairy then reveals that Adele's healing powers continues to grow the more monoliths they discover. She even mentions that Adele is no ordinary human because the monoliths are influencing her. The mischievous fairy then tells her that the best way to heal Hexion is to let their whole bodies touch. She points out that they should try it since the two already look like they're mates. OMG, how scandalous! This fairy clearly wants him to get it on. But will it actually work? Poor Adele is so flustered while Hexion is left confused since he can't see nor hear the fairy. Adele then asks how they can leave, so the fairy points out that she can easily reopen the path because she has the monolith's blessing. Adele is glad to hear this, so she drags Hexion along with her, leaving behind an annoyed fairy who is upset that she is leaving so soon. When they get to the clearing, the two of them are surprised to see that Kuarn is still there, waiting for them this whole time. Now in the thick of the forest, surrounded by tall trees that stretch for miles, the trio of Adele, Hexion, and Kuarn find themselves alone. Adele again expresses how she's at a loss for words because of how persistent Kuarn seems to be, but actually, the poor orange-haired guy is just super fixated on the fact that she keeps on ignoring him. But in her defense, Adele reminds him that apparently he just happened to be there for a walk anyways. And as if proving his point, when Hexion calls out to Adele to tell her that the horse is ready for their journey, she immediately turns her head, paying little attention to Kuarn. Kuarn is about to complain again, when at the same time both he and Hexion's sharp senses alerted them to something in their midst. And Kuarn, who is closest to Adele, quickly asks the maiden to get behind. Thankfully, Kuarn pushed her out of the way, as immediately after, a spear was thrown right where she was, and though it missed her, it grazed Kuarn by his arm. The boy ignites his fire magic in response, and a group of cloaked men arrive, threatening Adele to stop looking for the monoliths. When Kuarn tries to impose his status, the men then warn him that if he continues to trek along Adele's path, then misfortunes would befall the Bifta household. And that's how Adele and Hexion knew that the strangers weren't under the Duke's control. Anyhow, all three come out unscathed by the encounter, but Adele decides to confront Kuarn about his true allegiances. She asks him if he truly isn't there on behalf of the Duke, then she gives him one chance to meet at a fabric shop closest to the Bifta estate. When Hexion asks her why she did that, Adele reasons that in order to not raise any more unwanted trouble when getting the notebook with the monolith decipherings, it's better to have someone with free access to the estate. And besides, if things manage to stray, then she has a reliable knight by her side. Oh, how sweet that she looked at Hexion lovingly when she said that. With that, the two bid their goodbyes until tomorrow's breakfast, although both she and Hexion immediately lose their sanity thinking about the romantic kiss they shared. The next morning, the two head straight to Adele's informant, who Hexion notes has a really large estate. It turns out Adele's informant is also a childhood friend, Jean. Unfortunately, their initial meeting is cut short as Jean bids them to get inside, saying they have already been exposed. Adele takes the liberty of introducing Hexion to Jean, her childhood friend, and the one who took care of her when they were kids. But what interests Hexion the most is the fact that Jean is the chief of the Information Guild. He had expected him to be a high-ranked official, but not the actual head. Jean then reveals he knows much about his guest as well, stating Hexion's title as the Grand Duke Militario, and the fact that Hexion helped Adele escape from the Duke, and the two now currently live at Hexion's own estate. Now that's a head of an informant-based organization for you, Mr. Jean and his sassy eyes. Anyway, Jean specifically states that if he had known Adele was alive, he would have rescued her himself. But getting back on the topic, Hexion assumes that Jean is influential enough to have spies even on the royal estate, to which the latter admits. In fact, he even knows of the Emperor's grave illness, as well as his unnatural favoritism for Hexion against the Crown Prince. Adele tries to cut Jean off, thinking he may have said something insensitive, but Hexion motions for her to calm down. And so, the boys talk business. Hexion makes a hint about his true plans, to which even Jean says he can't figure out. Revealing that he knows of Hexion's sickness, what doesn't he know about? Jean questions why the Grand Duke would be so willing to commit something close to treason if the Emperor provides his medicine. Hexion simply states that his decisions were because of Adele's encouragement, and what's more, she can heal his disease. The news of Adele being a healer visibly shocks Jean. Anyway, Hexion states that he can't stand by as the Emperor's rule continues to exploit the country, and states that even if it's dangerous, even Adele's help is needed. Upon hearing those words, however, Jean offers to aid him, on the condition that Adele isn't part of the plan, alluding to how he won't lose her a second time. Of course, Adele manages to convince him otherwise, saying that she trusts Hexion, and so the chief of the Information Guild sets his price to about 1,000 gold bars. Adele is shocked because it's equal to a kingdom's revenue. But not to worry, old money Hexion has it covered, and he even offered to pay 2,000 gold bars. He's rich. Hexion also offers to have the Emperor's personal treasury accessible to Jean once they succeed, and that seems to be the end of that. But when the topic of Adele's safety comes up again, the two men clash because Jean wants her to stay at his castle for protection. Problem was, the argument arises to the point where Jean unsheaths his sword. The moment Jean points his sword upon Hexion, the latter stands up, and with an air of smug confidence around him, calmly says that despite Jean's concerns, what he did wasn't very gentlemanlike. Ooh, burn. But matter-of-factly, Jean is quite serious about testing Hexion, and he swings his sword down immediately. The Grand Duke dodges, of course, but Jean calls him out on it, seemingly intent to keep the fight going. Thankfully, Adele finds whatever she can get her hands on, which was a macaron, by the way, and flings it toward Jean's head. Getting hit by food jogs the aggressive Jean back to reality, all the while Adele continues to scream at him. She did, in fact, went to him for help, and now he's taken the liberty of deciding things about her without even asking her. Adele gives him an ultimatum, that if he were to continue doing so, he might as well finish his competition with Mr. 2,000 gold bars. And yes, Mr. 2,000 gold bars is Hexion, who looks a bit sheepish as soon as he hears it. Actually, Adele also calls out Hexion, as it seems he's trying to do the same thing he did during his fight with Kuarn. Now that the matter is resolved, the two man-childs at the behest of Adele now finish writing their contract. Once business is done, Adele and Hexion wait for their carriage to arrive, but before Adele could get in, Jean again warns her about the dangers of someone like Hexion. He also bids her to come to him anytime, and this time, his tone and expression is softer than before. Meanwhile, that very night, Adele finds herself having trouble sleeping. Thinking perhaps being tired for the past 2 days is the reason, what's actually on her mind is Hexion and his pale expression on the ride home. He also didn't send for her, despite her specific order to call for her when he feels unwell. And so after some thinking, she finally decides to go to him. Unfortunately, she finds him drunk in bed, mainly because his sickness has progressed again. When asked why he didn't ask for help, Hexion admits that he believes Jean was right. He'd only hurt Adele by being close to her. Adele gets so angry at Hexion for shying away again, grabbing him by the collar, but she releases him after assuring him that she chose him. She also reveals how the new way she could heal him according to the fairies, but as soon as Hexion heard her reasoning, he declined, asking if that was truly what he was to her, just a means to an end. Ouch, that hits you right in the feels. Hexion's sudden question leaves Adele gasping for answers. She could only muster that she didn't mean to do the new healing method now, but her mind is still racing. Her thoughts center on the fact that she truly does know. She knows how Hexion sees her. Despite their contractual relationship, his feelings still make their way up to the surface. Adele's thinking was interrupted, however, when Hexion slumps towards her, resting his head on her shoulders. It's not for something, though, as apparently the man had just fallen asleep. The next morning, the two share a rather awkward carriage ride, though Hexion is still a little bit absent-minded, and Adele has to snap at him to get his attention. According to him, however, he doesn't remember anything from last night. Which is probably for the best, right, Adele? Anyway, this just leaves him saying sorry if he did anything rude, to which a flustered Adele denies anything of the sort. After some time, they arrive at the fabric shop where they're supposed to meet with Kuarn. And speaking of the devil, Kuarn had perhaps not the best disguise. He did wear a robe as instructed, but it was a pink-colored woman's robe. His thinking was that since it's a woman's shop, he should disguise himself as a woman. But you being freaking tall and built like a man ruins all that, Kuarn! Still, now that he's here, Adele bids him to come inside, where she tasks him with retrieving the notebook from her old room. And to ensure Kuarn wouldn't read it, Adele lies that it contains a magic spell where if someone was to read it, she would die. Even Hexion is so impressed by Adele's ability to lie. She was practically so calm. Soon enough, Kuarn sets about trying to accomplish his task, which he proclaimed would only take 10 minutes. Actually, he did manage to find it quickly enough. Unfortunately, as soon as he had the notebook in his hands, Kuarn gets confronted by the Duke himself. With the possibility of being caught, Kuarn immediately hides the notebook inside the pink robe he was fortunate enough to bring. Looks like the woman's robe came in handy after all. Still, Kuarn now has to think of a way to leave, as all he needs is to get outside. Thankfully, his father doesn't seem to notice him taking something, but rather comments how this time it was Kuarn acting weird after Karena had left. It seems to strike a chord with Kuarn, who mockingly agrees with the Duke, saying he must be foolish since he doesn't have the mighty Bifta blood, unlike Felis, who he says is his father's true heir. Duke Bifta is vexed, but Kuarn rambles on. He continues about how all the Duke's children have problems, with him being a burden, Karena being a stand-in, and Felis being a recluse. He even pointed out his mother had not been herself ever since she was tasked to take care of the Duke's niece. The final straw, however, is when Kuarn retorts back to the Duke's threats by asking if he'll lock him up too, and how now one child is gone, it's only when his father has taken an interest in him. Wow, slow down, Kuarn. Almost sounds like you're in dire need of therapy. And so the Duke raises his hand in anger, determined to hit his insolent child, when his wife enters the room. The two begin to quarrel on whether he was about to hit their son. Meanwhile, Kuarn jumps out the window, seizing the opportunity to escape. As for Adele, she has begun to worry whether or not Kuarn has been caught by the Duke, when suddenly he bursts into the room out of breath. He plops down the notebook, still wrapped in the pink robe, by the way, and yells at her to keep the notebook closed. He also bids her to leave immediately, as his father might have sent someone else after him, although he also remarks that there's no chance the Duke saw the notebook. Adele seems shocked that Kuarn believed her lie, and at his genuine concern for her at this point. So for that, she says her thanks and makes her way out of the shop, leaving Kuarn in a state of happiness because this is the first time Adele has thanked him for anything. During the ride home, Hexion praises the way Adele handled things. The topic eventually goes to Adele's powers and how she can see the flow of magic. Regardless, Hexion bids her to keep her safety the first priority when in the Imperial Castle. A few days later, the banquet held by the Emperor arrives and Hexion checks on Adele to see how she was. When he did, her beauty was so great that he was frozen at the door. Adele's question if she looks alright seems quite irrelevant when the man was frozen, so much so that Hexion drops the fan he was holding. A fan that, according to him, he had picked because it matches her dress and he wanted to give it to her before they left. Unfortunately, Adele takes the flustered appearance of the Grand Duke for nervousness for meeting the Emperor again. No, honey, it's not because of that. Thankfully, a maid was there to tell her the truth, saying the Duke reacted because of her, although Adele wishes that he told her himself. Anyway, the Imperial Castle is now filled with nobles anticipating the arrival of the guests of honor. It seems that almost everyone is gossiping about the mysterious Grand Duke and his new wife. Imagine their surprise when they arrived seeing Karena, Adele actually, to be a fair young maiden who looks like a foreign princess. But equally in the limelight, Hexion seems to have all the eyes of the room pointed at him, as nobody had expected such a beautiful man from the armor-wearing Grand Duke. It's the first time revealing his face, after all. All the whispers make Adele nervous, but it doesn't compare to the happy feeling she has now with the Duke. Meanwhile, a bunch of ladies explode in gossip in the background, but even they notice that Lady Aaliyah doesn't seem to be herself. For now, the crowd seems content to keep murmuring and not approaching the guests of honor. It seems that they've all been taken aback by both Adele and Hexion's appearances. Hexion takes this chance to also praise Adele for her beauty, citing the only reason he didn't during the morning was because she got mad at him for calling her that in the forest all those days ago. This leaves Adele a bit flustered, and so she asks the Grand Duke to fetch some drinks. She makes her way out to the balcony, where moments later she gets approached by Lady Aaliyah, who was visibly changed, pleading on her knees for help, saying that she will be thrown out onto the streets, or worse, killed. Adele bids the frantic Lady Aaliyah to calm herself, and she correctly deduces that it was about the opiate drug. It seems that Lady Aaliyah is now being blackmailed by the dealer, threatening to reveal her habit if she doesn't find the money for it soon. Unfortunately, even if she wants to stop, Lady Aaliyah finds herself not being able to sleep without it. Even if she knows it'll destroy her body, she's become truly addicted. Don't do drugs, people. Anyhow, Adele thinks that Lady Aaliyah's father, the Marquess Aaliyah, and his vast influence could perhaps help his daughter, though dealing with the dealers might be another thing. Still, Lady Aaliyah continues to beg for help, alluding that it was Adele who managed to give her advice about this beforehand. This puts Adele in a precarious situation, as she only knew little of the drug and its affairs since she heard a rumor about it before she died. Thankfully, Hexion arrives, their drinks in tow, making Lady Aaliyah frantically end the conversation. Adele still manages to remind her, though, that rushing to her for help won't do much, so she will have to wait. She tells Hexion about it, like how a wife tells her husband things. Ah, so cute. And despite her hesitation in tackling the problem, he notes how it could be to their advantage to help Marquess Aaliyah due to his influence. Regardless, the banquet is about to start, so the two head back in. There, they encounter Duke Bifta and Kawarn. And although Kawarn was stunned by her beauty, tripping to the floor even, her father, on the other hand, not much so. They confront each other, but in a classy, pretentious sort of way, as the Duke rambles on about how his precious daughter is now off to marry. Hexion steps in, alluding to how much mistreatment his supposed precious daughter had endured under him. And when the Duke retorted, it was Adele's turn to be strong-willed, facing her father without breaking social etiquette, promising to repay her father all the alleged kindness she received from him. Sassy. Kawarn could do nothing but stand by as Adele essentially declares an all-out war against the Duke. He also remembers asking why his father would decide to try and have her killed when he had her replace Karina in the first place. Anyhow, it seems that the Duke himself is not in the mood to create a bigger controversy with this conversation, and with a look of annoyance, suggests their little party to break up since the Emperor might arrive at any moment. Meanwhile, Adele notices Kawarn and Fellis present, but the Duchess is nowhere to be seen. She instead communicates with Kawarn via hand signs if he got caught about the notebook, to which the latter replied, in hand signs too of course, that he only got scolded for the trouble. The Duke didn't know he took something. As Hexion observes her, he can't help but think she's become a lot like a lion tamer with all the things she's been doing and the people she's influencing. He's included in that list too. His pride just won't let him see it. Anyway, Adele expresses her thanks to Hexion for coming to her aid when the Duke tried to subtly attack her. She also notices how red his face is, to which Hexion replies he truly can't hide his emotions. Suddenly, a call reverberates around the hall, announcing the Emperor's arrival. The once lively hall has fallen silent, and only the echoes of the Emperor walking to his throne can be heard throughout the room, as Adele notes. It's like the room is holding its breath. Finally, the Emperor bids them all to settle and offers recognition to Grand Duke Hexion and his wife, Karina Bifta. He asks both for a drink in private, and despite Hexion's warning about it, along with not giving hints about her powers of course, it doesn't take long for his malicious personality to surface as they did so. The Emperor's degrading and sneering talks feel like they're piercing poor Adele's skin, as his eyes progressively scan her down to her very soul. She can do nothing but clench her hands, but she calmly answers the Emperor's question about her name. But when she answers Karina, the man just laughs, referring to it as Adele's shell she's wearing. That alone proves how knowledgeable and calculatingly cold he is. After thinking about it, Adele admits her true name and her true status at birth. The Emperor then asks about Hexion's illness, asking if she knows about it. Adele decides to feign her ignorance. The Emperor, instead, sneeringly asks Hexion to take off his upper garments to show her, even making fun of him for struggling to do so. And although Adele is shocked to how much the disease has spread, she still calmly answers the Emperor that she loves Hexion no matter what, much to the old man's interest. He flashes his hand, and a bolt of red magic hits Hexion while he proclaims love can't do much for him now. Unbeknownst to him, however, Adele can see it, confirming that he is controlling Kalot. As the Emperor bids her to leave to talk to Hexion alone, he makes it very clear that now he has his weakness, and that is if Adele were to suddenly die. Anger and rage fill the room as Hexion hears the Emperor joke about Adele suddenly dying. Seeing his expression, the Emperor is amused at how Hexion now expresses his feelings unlike before. After openly hurting and mocking Hexion, he dismisses him calmly, giving him permission to leave his presence. How irritating! He toys with Hexion as if he was an object! Soon after Hexion leaves, the Emperor does likewise as he is to meet with Marquise Lovan. In another part of the palace, the Crown Prince Khalid stumbles upon Adele wandering alone away from the banquet. Although this is their first time conversing alone, Khalid talks to Adele in an all-too-familiar tone. In Hexion's absence, he takes the opportunity to scare Adele off, telling her of Hexion's morbid past and all his flaws. He really is foul. Inside and out, his attitude just rots away. Under the pretense of helping her escape from Hexion, Khalid offers for her to join his harem instead of marrying Hexion. Ugh! The audacity! Hearing this, Adele quickly refuses and reassures him that Hexion is not the madman he makes him out to be. When Hexion arrives, he calls out Khalid for not being able to distinguish harassment from help. He ultimately reminds Khalid that he is set to meet with their father, the Emperor, so he best be off. After all, someone who isn't regarded as highly as Hexion is rarely presented with opportunities to meet with the Emperor. Therefore, Khalid should make haste and seize the chance. Ooh, what a burn! Infuriated, Khalid leaves the couple alone. As soon as Khalid is out of sight, Hexion immediately leans onto Adele for support. The two leave back home shortly after. In the carriage, Adele worries about her fiancé's condition. Hexion, on the other hand, is more worried about Adele and Khalid's interaction. As they head back home, he tells her of his monstrous past, just as what Khalid had mentioned earlier. As he confesses the sins of his past, he can only ask for Adele not to leave him. He doesn't feel like he deserves her at all, but for her love, he is willing to make amends. Hearing Hexion wallow in his past was more than what Adele could bear. How could someone as great as him believe himself to be a monster? As a matter of fact, he is the victim. Everything in his monstrous past isn't even entirely his doing. It's because the Emperor had forced him to do such things. The Emperor pulled all the strings, so it's unfair for Hexion to think that he's responsible for everything. As she reassures him, she mentions that no matter what happens, she would not leave him. When they arrive back home, Adele immediately escorts Hexion to his quarters that he may rest. Even after she manages to change out of her dress, she notices that his condition still isn't improving. This is all the Emperor's fault! Wanting to alleviate his worsened state, she remembers the fairy's advice of having more physical contact for more effective healing. In an attempt to heed this advice, Adele caresses Hexion's cheek and leans for a kiss. A flustered Hexion tells her that she doesn't have to resort to these means just to help him. Hearing this, she reassures him that it isn't just because she wanted to help him, but it's also what she desires. Yeah, Hexion, just let her help, will you? Not long after, Adele decides to express her hidden worries. Even after everything dies down, she fears that she cannot take responsibility for Hexion because of her current situation. After all, she is merely Karena Bifta's substitute. As he listens to Adele, Hexion tells her that she will never be tied down. When the day comes that she breaks free of the shackles of being a substitute, she is free to leave as she pleases. In gentle and hushed tones, he expresses his support for her to search for the thing she's always wanted. What a green flag! The two soften their gazes at each other's kind words. As the night fades, the two get intimate in the solace of their room. In the morning, the two start their conversation with Hexion's confession of remembering the events of when he was drunk. Hexion and Adele's early morning conversation is interrupted when Orlando knocks on Hexion's door. The two panic and are unable to collect themselves when Orlando opens the door. Seeing both of them flustered, he could only guess that the two were intimate last night. He tells both of them to prepare and make their way downstairs as soon as they're ready. When they get down, the servants look at them with a hint of gleam in their eyes. LOL, it's like they're saying congrats for an eventful night, if you know what I mean. A lavish breakfast is prepared for them both. As they dine, Adele excitedly comments on her observation of Hexion using his left arm. To his surprise, he indeed is able to move it better than he did before. The two conclude that the healing truly is much more effective this time around. Later on, Adele expresses her desire to quickly uncover and decipher the fourth monolith. And indeed, they're back to reality and back to business. She also expresses other matters that she needs to immediately attend to, such as the matter involving Lady Aaliyah. Hexion reminds Adele that uncovering the fourth monolith should proceed with great caution, as they were warned to be careful. Acknowledging this, the two agreed to depart in 2 days' time to prepare for their venture. On the day of their exploration, the two hold hands as they venture out into the forest. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of eyes from the bushes fixate on them both as they go deeper into the clearing of trees. Meanwhile, back at Hexion's mansion, Duke Bifta's carriage arrives without warning. But it seems that it isn't the Duke who has come. A woman introduces herself as Bella, and she's come on the Duke's orders. Jeez, what happened to her? She looks exhausted as ever. The name Bella seems to ring a bell for Frey. She remembers Adele mentioning Bella once when she had arrived at Hexion's mansion. No doubt, Frey deduces that this is the same Bella servant that used to bully Adele in the past. With a determined look, Frey makes sure to avenge Adele as she puts Bella through harsh training. As you should, Frey. Go put Bella in her place. In the forest, Adele and Hexion face a dilemma. The air around them seems to have a high concentration of toxins. Slowly, Adele loses consciousness as she succumbs to the fumes. Although Hexion could stand the fumes, if they're to endure it any longer, it could be life-threatening for Adele. He leaves her momentarily, trying to find a way out of the intoxicating air. Oh, I hope nothing happens to her, though. As he ventures further, he notices a rabbit enduring surprisingly well amidst the fumes. Could the berries the rabbit is eating be the key to detoxifying? He tries one for himself before trying it on Adele. After a while, Adele slowly wakes up in Hexion's arms, albeit confused as to why he's carrying her. In response, he explains their predicament of needing to evacuate from the poisonous fog quickly. Hexion also mentions the fruit he gave her to detoxify. Once more confused, she asks how he was able to give it to her while she was unconscious. Shyly, he confesses that he passed it to her through his mouth. Hexion, you cheeky guy! As both fluster over the earlier events, a voice echoes itself through the forest. Initially, they deduce that it is the rabbit that is speaking, but seeing the rabbit giggle, it was enough confirmation that the voice did emanate from it. The voice carries on, telling them it was no time to relax. From where the rabbit stood, a she-elf engulfed in purple aura shows herself to the couple. She looks at the two rather menacingly, remarking that they both look delicious to eat. I mean, they are an attractive couple, so I can't blame her. Showing her full human-like form, Adele catches on that the woman before her is a goblin. The woman reminds me of Ariel with her red hair. Urgently, Hexion instructs Adele to stay behind him. Seeing this, the goblin could only express her indifference to Hexion's existence. She makes it known that the only reason she showed him the antidote was because of her interest in saving the woman with him. She tells them that Adele's scent is very familiar to her. It was that of Huxenlight. Curious, the goblin asks if she was his daughter and how Huxenlight could have survived for so long away from the forest. Adele reveals that Huxenlight had died a long time ago. Hearing this, the goblin mulls it over and makes sense out of it. It seems that even if he has died, his lineage still carries on, and right now, it is coursing in Adele. As Adele divulged her objective of searching for the fourth monolith, the goblin retorts that she should pay a price for passing through the forest. I'm reminded of those trolls under the bridge who collect toll fees. Confused, Adele asks how she could possibly pay, but she is cut short when the woman hastily plants a kiss on her lips. Satisfied, the goblin agrees to lead Adele to the monolith. Out of nowhere, she opens a portal that resembles the galaxies of the night sky. As Adele is entering, she begs the goblin to allow Hexion to accompany her. Despite the goblin's indifference to Hexion, she agrees out of respect for Adele. However, she warns that she is not responsible should he be hypnotized by the portal along the way. While all three cross the portal, Adele is first swayed by the hypnotic illusions. Frantically, Hexion tries to dissuade her from the illusions. Without Adele as referee, Hexion and the goblin cannot stand each other's presence. They're like cats and dogs fighting. Hexion tells her that he is trying his best to hold back his killing intent. In amusement, the goblin retorts that if he keeps holding on to that pride, he himself will be the cause of Adele's death. It takes a while for Hexion to regain his composure after hearing what the goblin said. Snapping out of his little trance, he focuses on Adele once more. When they cross the other end of the portal, Adele wakes up as the galactic illusions fade. She takes in the scenery of the place before her, the huge lake, the special plants. The goblin space is truly beautiful. As she scans the place, she notices the fourth monolith and asks for permission to decipher it. The goblin consents, and she wonders how long it will take for Adele to decipher the text. Meanwhile, as other goblins and pixies arrive, they all crowd around Hexion. I would also crowd around them, just saying. Just like the female goblin, they too are displeased with Hexion's presence. Okay, what? How can you not like him? It turns out the forest goblins took a dislike towards Hexion because they could sense the Vael in his body. Upon hearing this, he looks confused, and ultimately, he deduces that they mean the disease within him. The goblin cuts Hexion off, saying that it wasn't just because he was exposed to Vael's poison, but actually, he himself exudes the power of Vael. Hexion is taken aback by her statement. How could he exude and possess the power of Vael without knowing it? Their talk is cut short when Adele exclaims that she's done deciphering the monolith. This was much to the goblin's surprise. She has never witnessed someone decipher so quickly. As Adele joins Hexion, she tells him the contents of the monolith. Yay, story time! I just love it when they divulge past events. Long ago, a cruel force called the Vael appeared. A great battle was waged, and the keeper of the place managed to seal the Vael in the god tree. But because of a mistake on Huxenlight's part, the Vael was accidentally released back into the world. When Huxenlight began searching for the Vael, she gained information that Alba Bestia had become king after the prince died and his majesty fell ill. Ultimately, the throne was ceded to Alba. The townspeople had no qualms with this, as they believed more in the temple than the royal family. With Alba, the high priestess king, they were more than satisfied. Huxenlight felt as if the Vael had manipulated her friend into scheming those events. She really does try to see the good in everyone, huh? Alba couldn't have possibly orchestrated an overthronement by his own will. Trying to find a way to separate the Vael from her friend, Huxenlight ventured into the forest once more. It was during her venture that she stumbled upon someone who shouldn't have been there. Similar to Hexion, it was a man whose body was petrified by the disease. Huxenlight felt guilty seeing the man in his disease. If this was caused by the Vael, then this was certainly her fault. I bet she feels like she needs to be held accountable for everything the Vael causes. Returning to the Master of the Forest, Huxenlight asked for counsel regarding her friend in the Vael. The Master revealed that it was too late for Alba, as his body was already taken over by Vael. But despite the brainwashing, that was merely part of the Vael's weakened state. Its true power was yet to be released, as it was being held at bay by the Master of the Forest. Only the Holy Sword, Shane Knight, could vanquish Vael. Huxenlight would be given the power of God so that she may utilize the sword to its potential and rid Vael of this world. However, the only way to execute this was to cut through Alba's body. I think this will be hard for her to do. I mean, he's still her friend after all. Being given the power of God, Huxenlight also had the ability to purify Vael's poison. Upon knowing this, Huxenlight's first initiative was to heal the man she met at the forest earlier. As she made efforts to heal him of his disease, she and the man fell in love. His love gave her courage to face her fate, her reality. Soon after, it was finally time for Huxenlight to retrieve Shane Knight. However, as she comes to retrieve it, she is intercepted by Alba himself. Ooh, I sense a face-off coming up. Alba greeted his old friend and tried to convince her to join him. But Vael had once again seized his mind. Someone tell this old dark force to get a life! The Vael indulged information that Huxenlight was already in love with another. Hearing this, Alba lost composure. How dare she? Everything he ever did was all for her, but suddenly she loved another? Huxenlight doesn't understand what Alba means. Gaining strength and performing miracles, all that Alba did so Huxenlight would change her feelings for him. Ah, yes, the pain of unrequited love. But even now, when he was king, Huxenlight chose another over him. Alba had conceded to the Vael as he had felt persuasion was useless now. Heeding the Vael's whispers, Alba pushed through with killing his friend. He unleashed a wave of the Vael's power, but thanks to the Shane Knight, Huxenlight was not petrified. Suddenly, soldiers materialized around her. How could she not have sensed them approaching? With all their might and weaponry, they charged at her. At this point, Huxenlight had all sorts of weapons embedded on her, but still, she managed to utter an apology to her friend. She has too pure of heart, I say. She had not known his feelings for her, and for that she was sorry that he suffered because of her. Her apology was enough to stun Alba. Taking advantage of the situation, with one last surge of strength, Huxenlight cut Shane Knight through Alba. As the Master of the Forest said, this was the only way to separate Alba and the Vael. Finally separated, Alba took one last look at his friend. In his bleeding and dying state, he commanded the soldiers to stop their attack. He urged her to escape and go back into the forest. He couldn't have her, but it didn't mean that he still couldn't save her. Oh, that's still kind of selfless of him. As the bittersweet memories of Alba and Huxenlight come to a close, Adele collapses as she recounts their story. Oh, just like what happened last time, when the tears flowed uncontrollably from her as she told the contents of the monolith. Puzzled, the goblin asks Hexion about her collapse. In response, he tells her that she faints whenever she recounts the contents of the monolith. It was almost as if she was feeling the experience as her own. Hearing this, the goblin advises Hexion not to proceed with searching for the succeeding monoliths in order to preserve Adele's well-being. After 5 days, Adele finally awakens. But as soon as she wakes up, she does not take her time to rest. Immediately, she asks around about matters, especially matters relating to Lady Aaliyah. When Adele comes down from her quarters, she is perplexed by what she sees. Right before her is Bella, and it seems that she's treating Adele rather nicely this time. How mean was Bella for Adele to actually be shocked by her kindness? During Bella's stay in Hexion's mansion, she reports her observations to Duke Bifta through letters. See, I knew she couldn't be trusted. Adele quickly catches on that her father must have sent Bella to investigate. However, she has no reason to send Bella back to the Bifta household. As they make their way to Lady Aaliyah, Adele expresses her concern for Hexion as he seemed to be bothered by something. Just like how a wife senses her husband's displeasure, they really are a good match for each other. Although he doesn't tell her, he's actually bothered by what the goblin said. What did she mean that he exudes the power of Vael? And that if he weren't careful, he'd end up killing Adele himself? Not wanting Adele to worry, he simply shrugs it off and leans on her shoulder for comfort. When the couple arrive at the Aaliyah residence, they are joined by Lady Aaliyah and her father, the Marquis Aaliyah. The Marquis praises the couple for being very benevolent in dealing with his daughter despite her involvement in drugs. However, he decides that his daughter must be dealt with the law accordingly, even if it affects the family. Oh wow! I wonder if that's out of love or cruelty for his daughter. Both Hexion and Adele try to aid Lady Aaliyah by easing her father's decision. At one point, they come up with a plan of catching the dealer that sold Lady Aaliyah drugs in the first place. Hearing this, Aaliyah points out that her dealer is backed up by a large organization. This doesn't dissuade them, as they still plan to push through with the capture. But to keep the Marquis's reputation intact, the operation must be carried out by the three: Lady Aaliyah, Adele, and Hexion. When the operation begins, Lady Aaliyah can't help but tremble. Being told to act naturally sure is easier said than done. She's sweating so much, it looks like she's melting. Playing the role of covert operatives, Adele and Hexion stay hidden as they watch Lady Aaliyah, who's patiently waiting for the arrival of the seller. Once he arrives, he explains why he's late and asks for her money first thing. He looks quite young, and his movements don't seem rushed. Momentarily, Hexion initiates arresting him. As soon as he does it, the seller looks guilty and scared. However, he refuses to disclose information about the source of the drug and its organization. Either he will get killed or go to jail for the crimes he committed. Eventually, he accepts his fate. In his defense, everything he did was all for his sister, who's suffering from calotte. He then apologizes as he begs to let him see his sister one last time. After hearing about the disease, Adele lets him explain more about it. The truth is that the little girl is dependent on the drug given by the organization. Calotte would immediately spread all over her body if she didn't take the drug. Although effective, the medicine is fake. It only stops the reoccurrence of the disease temporarily, not cures it. Later on, they all proceed to visit the seller's sister. Shortly, Adele attempts to use her healing power by touching her leg. Fortunately, she is successful with it, as the girl wakes up without experiencing any discomfort anymore. The seller and his little sibling express their gratitude to her. Moreover, he decides to tell them everything he knows as promised. So, the drug was actually brought back from abroad. The organization has sent many people like him into the alleys to sell it. Usually, the innocent ones walking into the market are the target. Ugh, I hate how people in power always victimize the vulnerable. He was appointed by the organization to sell drugs to Lady Aaliyah. However, he doesn't know why they were targeting her. The people in the alley who were recruited by the organization are very afraid of them, so they have no choice but to obey their orders. In return, they will give them the basic necessities like money and food. If the people refuse to obey, they will get killed, including their family members. The seller's knowledge about the name of the organization is helpful for Hexion to gather all the necessary information. On the other hand, the little girl reaches out to Adele and she assures her that she will help her get better. If her ability can be harnessed to assist more individuals, then she is determined to help and change the world. As a matter of fact, the organization had its roots a long time ago. However, it's only recently been able to create such a large scale. The opium distribution has been going on for quite some time as well. Adele assumes that the drugs belong to the royal family since there's no cure for calotte in folklore. Also, she has the ability to heal, which can alleviate illness. The rumor that the disease is a curse that the gods bring down is a misconception. Actually, the disease is born of evil power, and the emperor is the one who has control over it. She knows it because she was able to confirm it with her own eyes when he pressured Hexion before. Moreover, many nobles died after being infected and have spread among the people. It's possible that all of this was orchestrated by the emperor. The truth must be revealed to the nobles, and Hexion's resolution is to spread rumors first. The plan is to convince the Marquis once Lady Aaliyah's matters are settled properly. Spreading the rumors across the northern border is especially essential because it will be useful later on. If the Emperor is involved in the organization, they need to be extra careful. By the way, Quarren's mercenaries' primary mission is catching criminals, so Adele decides to contact him herself since Hexion refuses to do so. Afterward, Quarren receives the notice from Adele. Although his initial reaction is getting sour, he still follows her order. He then instructs his mercenaries shortly after. Later on, one of his men tells him about a chest full of letters that he found. That reminds him of her request, which is to bring any documents or letters that they find. With that, he reports everything to her. Shortly, Hexion arrives at the mansion without any useful information, despite questioning the members of the organization. How unfortunate! They don't know who their superior is. While Corin and Lady Aaliyah are bickering, Adele shuts them off as she shows the letter to Hexion. The moment he opens it, he recognizes the Emperor's seal instantly. This certain seal is used to indicate a secret or assassination. In addition, only a few people involved know about it. With that, he decides to bring the letter to Marquise Aaliyah first. They then proceed to the Marquise's house. The failure or success of the meeting will determine their future. I'm so thrilled! After learning about the matter of his daughter, Marquise clarifies if it's the Emperor's plot to weaken his family. There is proof that he is involved in the organization because of the seal in the letter. Oh no, anyone who tries to oppose him will be crushed! Although he is a ruthless person, Marquise believes that he only does it for the betterment of the country. However, Hexion argues that he kills people and destroys families just to satisfy his personal hobby. How cruel! Obviously, he has no intention of making the country prosperous. Currently, the spread of Kalot's disease caused by the Emperor is still under investigation. The theory is that the power he possesses is passed down from generation to generation in the royal family. This means that every era of emperors in the royal family used Kalot to take over the empire. However, it seems like he is using a different method now, just like what he's doing to the Aaliyah family. Hexion thinks that the reason their family became a target is because they have earned a lot of trust from the people around them. Since Kalot is a disease that originated from an evil creature, the Emperor, who's able to manipulate it, is probably not an ordinary human being. While tracing the origin of the disease through ancient records, the results show that it is related to the royal family. The Marquise asks Hexion and Adele about their next plan. In this empire, there is only one person who can cure the disease who is chosen by the power of God. He gets surprised, doubting whether it's true. However, his daughter can vouch that it's real because she has witnessed it herself. No matter the reason, the important thing is that Adele can cure it. She can try to help those who are infected if she meets them. With the reputation that the Aaliyah family has acquired for a long time, they can make people trust their alliance team with Hexion. Once they are healed and find out that their opposition to the Emperor will not subject them to the curse of God, then they will have the courage to stand up against tyrannical rule. We love to see the Emperor's downfall. The plan is to officially begin once public opinion is created, which will lead them to victory. In order to make it successful, the trust and cooperation of the Marquise are needed. Eventually, they receive approval to proceed with their plan. On their way back to the mansion, Adele and Hexion decide to drop in at the drug seller's place to check on his sibling's state. While walking, they catch some hoodlums attempting to assault the premises. Fortunately, Hexion manages to avoid the attacks. Given the opportunity to kill him, the culprit purposefully pointed the knife to his side. It seems like it was just a threat, since the other two ran away with no intention of fighting. Momentarily, he finds an item from the bad guys. Once he shows it to Adele, she can feel the power of the Emperor in it. The power that manipulates Kalot. In that case, the guy they were able to catch must be the Emperor's subordinate. In addition, she has encountered the Men in Black twice in the forest before, and they used to chase her at the hunting competition. Shortly, they proceed to visit the siblings after Hexion decides to take the vase and find out more information about it. Luckily, both of them are unharmed. To ensure their safety, he suggests letting them stay at his place. The siblings promise to do any work for them as they beg to keep them safe and repay their kindness. Upon reaching the mansion, the presence of the siblings catches the attention of the maids, prompting discussions about them. Tom introduces himself and his little sister, Mari, to everyone. Shortly after, Adele orders the maid to guide them in getting acquainted with the mansion. On the other hand, Hexion observes the same item that the Emperor used on him before. As soon as it comes into contact with air, it turns into gas and becomes invisible. It is possible that they release it into the target's bedroom to spread the disease. If that's the case, perhaps he will continue to create a new source of disease. Their mission is to know what happened after Huxenlight stabbed God's sword into Alba before. They need to decipher the next steal quickly. The next day, they will depart for it. By the way, Adele shows concern for Hexion's left hand. They haven't been able to hold hands for 2 days now. He responds with a playful grin, admitting that he's not okay. In response, they share a kiss, her way of offering assistance. Well, that is smooth. These two are so lovey-dovey, I can't. In the middle of the forest, Adele is found dead with blood all over her body. Shortly, Hexion wakes up full of sweat. Phew, it's just a nightmare, what a relief! However, it seems like the kind of dream that is a continuation of the story is very different from the nightmares that he had before. As soon as she wakes up, she worries about him immediately. She then assures him that it won't come true, it's just a dream. Also, she acknowledges that everything is going to be more dangerous now. Every time she sees him running towards the enemy, she gets very nervous. Hexion is also worried about blinking, afraid that she will suddenly disappear. He then kisses her after receiving reassurance. Later on, they roam around the forest, proceeding with their mission. While walking, Adele hears a strange sound, similar to the sound of a beast she heard on the steel before. It seems like something is coming near them. Momentarily, a white talking cat, as they assume, appears, which surprises the couple. Actually, it's a snow leopard. The species knows that they are looking for the fifth steel, the descendants of Huxenlight. With that, the leopard guides them to what they are looking for. Firstly, they need to go inside the goblin's barrier to find it. On the way there, Adele recalls that they went the same way before as well. The road was used to test the humans who came to find the stone. Passing the test is decided by the siren, the red-haired goblin. As the goblins of the island, they have the responsibility to protect the place. Shortly, the snow leopard asks them to think carefully about what they truly desire. Just when Adele is about to respond, everyone disappears in thin air, including Hexion. Afterward, she wakes up in a familiar room, contemplating whether it's just a dream or not. She then hears a voice calling out her name. As soon as her mother's face pops up at the door, she gets surprised. Is this just another dream or what? She goes as far as questioning if her mother is truly her own, seeking clarification. Meanwhile, her mother simply laughs, assuming that she had a bad dream. With tears welling in her eyes, she embraces her mother tightly. At the pub, Adele's mother orders her to bring water to the customer. It's quite busy around because of too many customers, but seeing her mom happy makes her happy as well. Shortly, Jean arrives, holding the items their mother asked for. She then asks about the business of the intelligence association he's involved in. There is nothing special, but the kids have been sick, and that's a problem. Momentarily, Adele feels a bit dizzy. She must be tired from all the busy work, so her mother advises her to rest. Honestly, she feels quite anxious despite the fulfilling life that she has had lately. When Jean drops by her room, he reassures her that everything's going to be fine. No, that's so sweet. During the night, she walks around the neighborhood alone. A lot of thoughts come into mind, but she eventually shrugs them off. Just in time, Hexion appears. She struggles to recognize him despite the feeling of familiarity. After he asks whether her life is happier without him, a realization hits her. She is now aware that the world in which she's currently living is just a test, showing her desire to live with her mother and pursue her dreams. She then remembers that in this virtual space, her desires will turn into reality. Despite Adele's contradicting thoughts, Hexion has become an indispensable part of her dream. Even though he's not real, she wants to live a life with him. Shortly after, she visits her mother while sleeping. Oh, she must be so in love with him, huh? The little time that they spent together was enough for her, and that made her really happy. Eventually, she decides to return to the real world, back to the place where she belongs and her help is needed. The moment she opens her eyes, she's back to the real world. She is able to regain consciousness quickly. With that, she's permitted to go to the steel. Meanwhile, Hexion is still unconscious and lost. The aura around him seems bad, which makes her feel uneasy. She chooses to wait for him, refusing to go alone. In his virtual space, he has already attempted to get rid of the virtual illusion, wherein he imprisons Adele many times. However, he keeps failing. A voice tells him that it's because of his insecurity, fearing the day that she leaves him will come. Hexion tries his best to fight against the voice because none of it is true. He is fully aware that everything is not real, so he won't be mesmerized by it. However, it is a fact that there is some darkness reigning in his heart. What could that be? In the real world, the leopard insists Adele go to the steel because looking at Hexion's current state, it seems like he can't go any further. Momentarily, he finally gains consciousness, but his eyes are now red. Or so she thought because he seems to be possessed. Now she really needs to go while the leopard takes care of him. The red aura surrounding him was exactly the same as the Emperor's aura. If she can decipher the steel, maybe she will find the answer. On the other hand, Hexion attempts to kill the snow leopard. It seems like Viel's power is amplified even more because he was awakened in this dimension. He just needs to pass this test. Suddenly, the leopard turns into a siren, indicating her desire to speak with him cautiously. It appears she is disturbed by the audacity of a troublesome creature like him sneaking into her forest. Hexion figures out that he is the monarch of the forest. It seems like he's being possessed by Alba's descendant. Although she can control the thing's aura, she can't differentiate him from it. He needs to gain his consciousness back to ease Vial's aura. She reminds him to gain back his calmness. In addition, he needs to control his emotions and think clearly. Shortly, he successfully gains back his consciousness. On the other hand, Adele senses something is off in the forest. From a short distance, she can see a tree near the stele with a blue, strong aura surrounding it. However, there's a red aura beneath it. The tree is actually the seal of Vial's aura. Despite its 100 years of existence, it's still so strong. She is then determined to decipher it quickly as she opens the notebook. Time to uncover all the juicy details. Being able to step into the forest means obtaining the approval of the owner. In order to live there, Huxenlight needs to stop the time flow in her body. Moreover, she is being tied to the forest with her partner. The only way she knows the situation outside depends on her old subordinate. She tries her best to take care of her loved ones in the forest, especially her partner. Then she gives birth to a baby girl. Following that, Huxenlight gives birth to her second baby. By that time, her subordinate finds her to inform her that Alba has died after the name of the empire has changed. Moreover, the current emperor used her name to inherit the empire. Without her consent? The audacity! Additionally, the prince who has taken over seems to be possessed by Vial. The reason he let Alba give birth was to become the eternal emperor of the empire. After hearing the information, the monarch thinks that Vial has begun to have thoughts the same as humans. Because of all the chaos, she suggests that it's best if Huxenlight doesn't cut off contact outside the forest. However, after the last meeting with her subordinate, she couldn't hear any more about the news out there. One day, her husband suddenly asks her about letting the kids stay in the forest. It's been 35 years since their babies were born, yet they still retain the appearance of a 5-year-old child. They don't grow up anymore. At this rate, they won't be able to meet anyone but them. To Huxenlight, it's her fault that their kids are locked up in the forest. She doesn't want to rob them of opportunities in the future. She then asks her husband to accompany their children out of the woods to live a normal human life. She will die instantly if she leaves the forest, compared to him, who's younger. Although the time difference that they will soon have is different, Huxenlight promises to always think of him. After persuading her family to get out of the forest, the monarch gives her a portion of God's power that she can pass on to her children. Given that the power strengthens the resistance to Vial's clones, she feels hopeful. She wants to keep the world safe because of her family. With that, she passes some of her power to her daughter, which will continue to be passed on through matriarchy forever. Huxenlight keeps praying for her children to have a bright future. The only way to let that happen is to allow her family to leave the forest. As Adele shuts the notebook, tears stream down her cheeks. After successfully deciphering the stele, she must return to Hexion, so there's no time to be emotional. Fortunately, upon her return, he's back to his normal state. Why does he seem like he's ignoring her? Anyway, the monarch confirms that the inner strength she has is the strongest among the descendants. Adele probably inherited the full power of Huxenlight passed down from her mother. Also, Vial might be able to sense her easily, so they need to go back. Shortly, she calls out to Hexion, deciding to disclose everything to him once they're outside. However, he also has something to confide in her. OMG, what a thrill! Adele is increasingly becoming irritated that Hexion continues to ignore her. It's been 4 days, and all he did was listen to her as she recounted the content of the monolith. He was supposed to tell her something, but he still remained silent. Just what did the fairy tell him to make him this way? She figures that who they encountered was in fact the monarch of the forest. She has had enough. She will confront him once and for all, but before she can do so, she encounters Mary cleaning the halls. Adele instantly worries about her leg, but the girl refuses, insisting that she is just a servant. However, Adele won't take no for an answer. It's been 10 days since she last treated her, so she may be feeling uncomfortable at this point. Adele figures that since her powers was amplified according to the monarch, she may be able to treat Mary's calotte without touching it. And so she takes the child's hand and prays that the child's body be purified and that all traces of Vial's poison be removed. At once, a bright light engulfs them, and even Tom hurries to their direction. Her power has clearly gotten stronger. Even Mary exclaims how her leg feels lighter than ever before. That cruel emperor, along with the evilness of Vielle, needs to be put down. Unbeknownst to them, one of the maids is actually hiding in a corner, clutching her chest out of shock. What did she witness? Oh no, let's just hope that she does not reveal this to the wrong people. Later on, Adele finally makes it to Hexion's office. They have an awkward conversation, with Adele pointing out that they hardly spoke for days. When she mentions that it seems as if he's making her wait her turn, he flinches badly while hurriedly denying such an offense. Seeing him so distraught makes Adele guilty. She softens and asks him what happened with the fairy, assuring him that they can worry about it together. To her surprise, Hexion answers that Jean will be picking her up soon. At first, she thinks that they would go together, but he actually wants her to go by herself. She questions his reason behind this, but he answers that he is doing this for her safety. He believes that he is a danger to her. So, in despair, he begs her to leave him. Surprisingly, she orders him to come closer. Even though he's confused, he obeys her. She grabs his face and firmly asks him if he never wants to see her again. Of course, he denies this, so she insists that he tell her the truth, promising to understand whatever it is. They talk about how Vielle has been possessing every emperor from generation to generation. It is revealed that once a prince is named as successor, the current emperor will abuse him to the extreme until he turns cruel. That is around the same time that their eyes turn red. Vielle is a creature known to consume people's pain and despair. Once a person is utterly weakened in some way, this evil being takes control of him. Adele puts two and two together and realizes that Hexion has been going through the same abuse since he was a child. This can only mean that the Emperor considers him as his successor. God, leave Hexion alone! He doesn't deserve any of this. It's becoming obvious that the current Crown Prince is merely a red herring. The Emperor has made preparations beforehand from the moment he was named Grand Duke, so that will not be surprising when a new Crown Prince is named. Hexion learned that a fragment of Vielle's body has been planted in him, so the being can eventually take control of him. It even woke during his encounter with the fairy. At that moment, he felt like he was a completely different person, with emotions he can hardly control. Seeing how distressed Hexion has become due to the memory, Adele convinces him that those emotions and actions were not truly his. She insists that they can find a way to get rid of it. However, Hexion tells her that the monarch warned him that since he has someone he truly desires so deeply, Vielle is able to take advantage of such a weakness with ease. If he fails to contain his emotions, then he may end up endangering the source of his emotions. Hexion truly fears that his desire for Adele will hurt her. Oh, my poor babies! Why can't they just be happy? Even if they see less of each other, this will not be enough. In fact, he'll actually long for her even more. He is frightened with the idea of Vielle's poison eventually taking over him. Adele promises that she will never resent him no matter what, but Hexion is terrified, scared that she'll see an unforgivable side of him, scared that she'll hate him. Adele sees how distraught he is by the idea, but still in this situation, she can't help but find his words lovable. Leave it to her to simp over her man in this situation. She embraces him warmly, assuring him that they will find a way. She swears that she'll never give up on him. Hexion gives in to her warmth, wondering if she will actually stay with him even after all of these are over. Instead of voicing out this question, he asks her instead if she likes him. She confesses that she does, before giving him a sweet kiss. Quarn is escorting Lady Aaliyah during her usual medicine run. The two of them are bantering again like usual. Quarn is once again complaining about having to do this, but he still does it because of Adele. This guy may have been a bully in the past, but he sure is becoming more and more soft for Adele. Lady Aaliyah is embarrassed that he deems this errand as annoying. However, they don't have a choice. After all, they have to keep this a secret. Many of her withdrawal symptoms are subsiding, so they only have to do this a few more times. They continue to bicker all the way until they reach the mercenary building, where a member of the guild approaches them to give a message to his deputy. It's a message from Adele, informing him of her move to the information guild. He is instantly confused by the sudden change. He wasn't even aware that Adele is connected with the information guild. Naturally, he is annoyed that he is out of the loop once again. Adele only seems to use him these days. Still, this is better than how she sees him before. This sure beats the time when she used to see him as horrifying. Meanwhile, Frey is helping her mistress prepare for her move. She swears that she will serve the future Duchess however she can. Frey is relieved that the Grand Duke and the lady did not break up. She believes that her ladyship is the only sunshine in her master's gloomy life. The only thing left for them after this new crisis is for them to walk the aisle. She swears in her master's name that she will protect the lady from any hooligan for this to happen. We have a fangirl in our midst. That's right, Frey. We support our power couple. Before Adele officially leaves, the two of them have a tender moment. She ensures that he is not turning dark right then. She is quite fearful of triggering him in any way. She even complains that they could only hold hands last night. Instantly, Hexion resembles a tomato. He confesses that he never imagined having someone to share his heart with in the past. Adele looks at him with love before taking his hand. Blinding lights emerge from their joined hands. She shows him how powerful she has become, confident that she can accomplish greater things now. So she makes him swear to never fall into despair over something he decides on his own. She wants a future that includes the two of them. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor orders Duke Bifta something that shocks him to the core. He wants him to get rid of his fake daughter, Lady Karina, aka Adele. Leave them alone! If only I can reach in this novel and deal with this Emperor myself! When Adele reaches the Information Guild, Jean shows her the room he has prepared. Adele is taken aback by how much effort her childhood friend has put into making things easier for her. Meanwhile, Frey insists she be treated with a sort of courtesy given to a lady of her standing. She even seems to be apprehensive of Jean's presence for some reason. Jean then introduces Luna to her, a trusted member of the guild. Jean has assigned her to help Adele throughout her stay. Luna admits to never having dealt with ladies with higher standing before, so Adele assures her to think nothing of it. Meanwhile, Frey is once again suspicious of her new company. I tell you guys, Frey is the true MVP here. Love how dedicated she is in protecting her mistress. Later on, Adele rests in her room, but she spends this time worrying over Hexion. Even though she used a significant amount of her powers that morning, this will be irrelevant once he visits the Emperor. She wants to make something for him that contains her power. That way he'll heal up even though she's not with him. Suddenly, Jean arrives, wanting to know what else she needs. She asks for more stationery. He agrees, but also apologizes if he fails to provide everything she needs during her stay. She catches him by surprise when she asks why he is always so kind. After all, he didn't used to treat her so delicately before. She tells him how reassuring it is that he is there to help her. She also vows to repay him in some way, someday. Jean insists that he is fine as long as she is safe. As he turns to leave, he tells her that despite the situation, he is glad that she is there. Adele realizes that Jean is more affectionate than he lets on. An uncomfortable situation arises when Luna serves her meal. She notices that it looks like the woman seems irritated by her somehow. At first, she thinks that she's only being cautious of outsiders. But when she tastes the food, it is incredibly sour, salty, and bitter. How is that even possible? Meanwhile, Luna walks away from the room with a smirk. The next morning, she confronts Luna about the meal, but the woman merely acts nonchalant, saying that the chef must have made a mistake. She even mentions that Adele probably just had an expensive palate. What is wrong with this woman? When Adele asks that they serve her the same meal as everyone else, Luna informs her that the guild leader has instructed her that Adele's meals should be separate. When Luna leaves, Adele wonders if the woman has always been this cold. To make matters worse, the food served to her is once again salty. Her suspicion grows even more when she learns that Frey's meals tasted just fine. Frey instantly voices out how wary she is of Luna from the moment she saw her. She becomes extremely worried that the next thing that the woman does is poison her lady. Adele does not want to make an enemy in the guild. However, even though she doesn't want to jump into conclusions, Adele still wants to know why she's acting like this. Frey then tells her updates from the duchy, particularly of how busy the Grand Duke has been. He is even supposed to visit the north soon. Adele asks her when the Duke is going to visit the Imperial Palace. She wants to give Hexion something that contains her powers before he goes. Frey then teases her for seeming to miss the Duke. Even though Adele reacts in protest, she admits to herself that she does not miss Hexion. I hope they can be together soon. It hurts to see them apart. Meanwhile, Hexion is receiving various correspondences. However, Orlando points out that he must rest. At first, he tries to brush off the old butler's words, but Orlando tells him Lady Adele's requests. She orders him that the Duke must eat 3 square meals, sleep for 7 hours, and take occasional breaks. Fondly, the Duke decides to follow his fiancée's orders. He shifts his attention to the letter in his desk and recalls how he made sure to create those contacts beforehand in the past, almost like a premonition for when he finally revolts. It is a similar feeling when he first met Adele. When she came into his life, it felt like everything fell into place. When it seems like Hexion is thinking about Adele too much, Orlando warns him against it, for it might trigger him. He is startled that Adele even ordered the butler to do this too. She is nothing but thorough. Sighing, Hexion focuses on his work, but not before ordering Orlando to prepare for their trip to the north. Adele and Jean are out in town. She worries that she's interfering with his work, but he tells her that keeping her safe is also part of his job. He mentions that he can't order Luna to accompany her anyway. At the mention of the woman's name, Adele is reminded that she still has to talk to him about her. She asks him about the guild's chef. When he answers that the chef has had no issues so far, she instantly knows that the intolerable food is definitely Luna's doing. She knows that she can't tell Jean about her concerns regarding Luna because he will instantly confront her. If she and Jean has been close for a long time, he'd be devastated for sure. She decides to do some more digging. The two of them enjoy a pleasant time, even though a suspicious Frey is following them around. The row goes from one store to another, trying out sweet treats and new food. Their last stop is the craft store. When Frey sees them enter a colorful shop, she is angered, thinking that the strange man is trying to seduce her lady. She follows them in, seeing them buying a string. When Jean asks if it is for the Duke, Adele explains that she plans to put some of her powers into it. She wants to help him in any way she can. Frey, upon hearing that Adele is doing this for the Duke after all, is visibly relieved by this. Her presence is already quite obvious to Adele and Jean, but they chose to ignore her. Jean then warns her of the upcoming danger, especially if she stays with Hexion. He promises to protect her if she chose her own safety. However, she tells him that she's actually not choosing danger, but she is simply choosing to be with him. Aw, their love is so pure. They deserve happiness. She knows that when they have each other, they can do anything. Jean allows her to do as she wishes. After all, he will do anything for her. Aw, Jean, I've been sensing these unrequited feelings for some time now. I feel so bad for him. Quarn has been called home, and the first thing he thinks is that he has gotten himself in trouble. But he is surprised and then angered when the Duke tells him that he'll be removed from the family registry. He is basically being cut off. The Duke claims that he is endangering the family, especially since he has garnered the Emperor's attention. In order to eliminate the risk, he has decided to remove him from the family. Naturally, Quarn lashes out, telling his father that he'd rather live on the run than have to live his life sucking up to some Duke who disowns his own children. He swears that he's leaving for good. Ha! Take that, Duke! Worst father of the year certainly belongs to you. The Duchess confronts the Duke about his decision, invoking the deal that they had when she agreed to be loyal to House Bifta. It is that the Duke will look after Quarn like his own. Quarn is adopted? What a twist! Despite the Duke's infidelity, she has stuck with him. She couldn't even mourn for her own daughter's funeral. Now, she can't even protect her older sister's son. Even though she is obviously angry, he reminds her that Fellow is also her son and that she also has to protect him. Meanwhile, Hexion reaches the north where he discusses with Derek, his aide-de-camp, that they ought to give a portion of Gideon's kingdoms back to them. In exchange, they will enlist their help. After all, they share a border with the Empire where the Kalat disease is already spreading. Once he shows them that the Emperor is the one responsible for this, they will surely join hands with him to protect their territory. Derek is in awe that Hexion managed to meet the future Duchess who can cure such a devastating disease. He points out that for the Duke to meet someone who can actually make him smile can only mean that there is divine intervention. Jean orders Luna that Adele requested that they serve her a meal same as everyone else. She is obviously annoyed by this, pointing out that the lady looks quite frail, so she shouldn't be allowed outside. Jean, with a fond look on his face, tells her that Adele is strong-willed. He orders Luna to take care of the lady. Luna is annoyed that some noble lady has the nerve to order the leader of the Information Guild around. This woman has some serious issues. You don't get to judge Adele? Meanwhile, Adele is making a bunch of protective bracelets for Hexion. She tries to infuse it with her power, but is unsure if it actually worked. She is startled when the fairy from her several adventures appears. She compliments Adele for the idea of putting Huxenlight's powers in the bracelet. The fairy is actually there to deliver a message from Pan, the monarch of the forest. He tells her to find the last monolith as soon as possible. This is where she will inherit all of Huxenlight's power. Suddenly, Jean barges in, visibly worried for Adele. He claims that Frey told him that she heard an intruder in her room, so she rushes in. Adele claims that she's alone, but for some reason, Jean feels a presence. He reaches forward, and without actually seeing the fairy, he manages to snatch it. The The fairy instantly begins squirming, wanting to escape. Adele ends up telling Jean everything, especially the existence of fairies. The fairy claims that Jean is quite strange since normal people can't see or feel their presence at all. He might have had an ancestor who received or inherited a fairy's powers. She thinks that Jean is a better companion for her during her journey to find the last monolith. But what about Hexion? Adele receives word that Hexion is yet to return from the north. She is still debating whether or not she should take Hexion with her to the forest. All of the fairies in the forest hate him, and this journey might endanger him further, especially with Vile's influence. When she looks out the window, she is surprised to see Luna giving bread to some street children. She has never seen such a gentle expression on her face. Suddenly, Jean informs her that Korn has come to visit her. He greets her in his usual haughty manner. He's even rude to Jean. Not one to back down, Jean points out that Korn has in fact been removed from the Bithta family registry. Korn is angered by the reminder. Adele is surprised by this information. When Jean gives them privacy, she asks him what happened. Korn visibly deflates, recalling how he got kicked out. Even the mercenary guild was informed that his adoption has been dissolved. He reveals that he is indeed adopted. He recalls how he tried hard to fit in with the Duke's family, even using his magic to keep his adopted father interested in him. But he quickly learns that he will never be loved as Felis or Karina. He then tells Adele that he actually came here to tell her to watch her back, since the Emperor is targeting her now. Instead of paying attention to this, Adele exclaims how he bullied her all the time, even though he was adopted too. She points out how she hated him and that he never once apologized for the things he did. To her surprise, Korn actually says sorry. This is a massive character development, y'all. He confesses that he bullied her because he wanted to feel like he belonged. He wanted to feel like a true member of the family. However, at some point, he did it because he enjoyed how she reacted. And no matter how cruel he was, she still looked at him for approval. Adele tells him that he is ridiculous for thinking she will forgive him after hearing such a reason. Korn looks terribly down right then, telling her that what he wants is for her to not hate him anymore. Sighing, Adele answers that since he is the only Bithta who apologized, he can be her errand boy since he owes her big time. Adele comes rushing to Hexion, asking if he's all right. Seeing her reaction, Hexion assures her that he's fine and encourages her to head inside. Inside, Adele hands him a bracelet imbued with her powers, effective against Kalot. She also brought a few extras, to which I really don't consider a few. Anyway, she instructs him to swap them one after another as soon as they lose effectiveness. Hexion gasps in disbelief, thinking that she spent all their time apart making these for him. Excitedly, he tries it on, not even minding if someone else can see. Suddenly, Jean cuts to the chase, asking if he really intends to join them in the forest. Seriously, I feel bad for this guy. The two just acted like nobody's around. Hexion affirms that since he has accompanied Adele on all her previous monolith deciphering excursions, it's only right for him to join on the last one. Additionally, Adele is more concerned that Vile's energy might manifest as it did at the previous monolith. However, Hexion still insists that he should be fine this time, attributing the previous incident to undergoing the fairy's test. Jean then asserts that it's best to choose the safer option, but Hexion immediately counters, asking if Jean means that he's safer of an option than him. Adele can sense the tension between the two, but Hexion suggests that the three of them can go, prioritizing Adele's safety above all else. Adele's eyes sparkle with admiration, and Jean sees no problem with that, so he accepts Hexion's suggestion under the condition that Adele's safety remains the priority. Hours later, they arrive at the fairy territory, a boundary only accessible to those with permission to travel farther. Hexion suggests they should be cautious since they have a first-timer with them, but Jean reminds them that he's under the fairy's recommendation, emphasizing that the fairy isn't very welcoming to Hexion. Hexion's tone seems boastful about trespassing, prompting Adele to step up, reminding them to focus on helping her find the trail. Although Jean notices that there are no walls between the two, he knows he should be happy for her. Suddenly, Adele discovers a portal, strangely unguarded this time. Jean spots a nearby cave, and Adele suspects the monolith must be inside. Hexion takes the lead and asks if she's alright since the terrain is in total darkness. However, due to Adele's eyes gifted by the fairy, she can see well and volunteers to lead, instructing the two to hold hands to avoid being separated. Suddenly, Adele notices something beneath the ice, a monolith. As she rushes towards it, she steps on cracked ice and plunges into the water. Mysteriously, there is no sign of the ice having cracked. Worst comes to worst, Hexion sees a drop of blood on the frozen ground. Suddenly, a creature emerges from nowhere, stating that only one of them is clean. The dragon makes it clear that he didn't do anything to Adele, and in fact, she chose her path herself. However, the dragon shall be the judge of whether they are worthy enough to stay alive. Jean advises Hexion not to let the dragon provoke him, but Hexion is more worried about rescuing Adele. Jean deciphers what the dragon has said, and that Adele is somewhere else safe, but Hexion didn't listen. Instead, he starts emitting such ominous energy, ordering the dragon to break the seal on the ice or he'll slash his neck through. Meanwhile, Adele just cuts her finger on the cracked ice and there's no serious injury to her. Thank God she's alive! Even though she's underwater, Adele does not feel wet, and she can even breathe. Worried that Jean and Hexion might be concerned about her, she decides to decipher the monolith quickly. Meanwhile, Jean struggles to fight the endless number of ghouls. Hexion, believing that if he kills the dragon, Adele will return, launches forward towards the dragon. However, the dragon reminds him that if they collapse above, then Adele can't return safely. Despite this, Hexion is willing to sacrifice himself just to kill it. He almost lands a hit on the dragon, but the dragon goes easy on them since Pan asked him to test Hexion. At this rate, Hexion will die because of Vial's energy that continually increases, so the dragon asks Jean to stop him. There's no way that body, which has been ravaged by Vial's venom for so long, will survive. The dragon is certain that Pan would have been able to suppress both the energy and the venom, but he lacks such powers. Therefore, Hexion will have to stop his rampaging on his own. Jean, realizing what is going on, tries to halt Hexion and assures him that Adele is somewhere safe. However, Hexion argues that he can't see beneath the ice and points out the drop of blood on it. Kalot is now coursing through his body, but Hexion doesn't care whether his entire body petrifies. In fact, if it does, then Adele would never leave him. Can someone smack him on the head? Jean is unable to bear it anymore, punches Hexion's face, reminding him that Adele needs him for her safety and her future. Jean emphasizes that Hexion can't succumb to the Kalot until Adele achieves her goals, or else Jean will have to put an end to him himself. Suddenly, the bracelet that Adele gave him falls off and disintegrates. This time, Hexion realizes that he's been running away in despair like a coward over events that have already happened, repeating the same cycle time and time again. In this moment, he feels the desperate need to hold Adele just once more, wanting to see her alive again. These memories, as if flowing in from somewhere far away, cause Vial's energy to fade. Suddenly, a blinding light reveals Adele, who safely returns above the surface. Seeing that half of Hexion's body is tainted with Kalot, Adele extends her hand to reach him, but her powers suddenly expel from her fingertips, leaving her wondering why it happened. Suddenly, Pan shows up, stopping Adele from approaching Hexion. It's a problem he must overcome on his own. This time, Vial's consciousness does not resurface, but his current state won't be enough to take on Vial. If Hexion cannot tame his rage on his own, then he will lose possession of his body in no time. Until Vial's remnants are removed from his body, he must resist his influence at all costs. To do that, his memory, which helped him subside the rage earlier, might be the key to suppressing his rage. The question is, what exactly is that memory and why is it buried in him? Pan puts him to sleep in order to retrieve his memories. But can someone explain how godly he looks? He's literally the definition of detailed perfection. Vial's remnants feed on emotions to amplify their strength, and as long as Hexion remains in this state, the energy will remain dormant as well. Pan then reveals Hexion's buried memories, but they seem disconnected from his first-hand experiences. Pan suspects they may be from his past life. The first time Hexion saw Adele, he perceived her as an imposter, acting as a replacement for Bifta's deceased daughter, a scarecrow entangled with him for political purposes. Despite this, her subtle and beautiful radiance captivated him, akin to a ray of sunshine filtering through the trees. Their similar childhoods fostered quick openness after only a few encounters. Despite attempts by the Duke to silence her, he gradually ceased interfering, allowing Adele to showcase her true intelligence and versatility. Hexion began to believe that life with his affliction wouldn't be unbearable if she were by his side. He even felt gratitude towards the Emperor for arranging their marriage. However, on their wedding day, unidentified assailants attacked Adele on her way to the ceremony. Suddenly, a reddish smoke fills the room, and an unfamiliar voice assures Hexion not to worry, as he will soon forget everything. To escape his pain, Vial utilized Hexion's body, causing him to slowly fade into pitch-black darkness. Even as his consciousness waned, A surge of emotions engulfed him: anger, regret, doubt, and sorrow. In his despair, a mysterious man appeared and Hexion begged him to save him. Suddenly, he found himself in a room, memories flashing back as if he'd been granted another chance at life. However, too much time has passed, resulting in deviations from his past. In this altered timeline, he never met Adele, and his calotte had already progressed significantly. Despite this, he felt compelled to ensure Adele's safety as her demise seemed imminent. However, tragedy struck. The Bifta family met a sudden demise. They were supposed to meet the following day, but she perished once again. Suddenly, the Crimson Smoke Demon appeared, and Hexion realized it was the entity responsible for Adele's repeated deaths. Hexion continued to ponder the repeated cycles of time since then. Instead of acting hastily, he methodically searched for the one responsible for Adele's murder based on his fragmented memories. He needed to uncover whether they were puppets of the Crimson Energy and their affiliations. However, he never seemed to have enough time. With each repetition of the time loop, his memories returned later and later. Compounded with his worsening disease, it became nearly impossible for him to move freely. Despite these challenges, Hexion managed to ascertain that the assassin had ties to the Emperor. While it wasn't always the same person, they consistently acted under the orders from the Emperor, indicating a connection to the Crimson Energy. Yet this knowledge felt insufficient. With each repetition, Hexion feared he would be immobilized before he could remember everything. If only he could vanish in exchange for Adele's survival. The weight of believing he was the reason for her repeated deaths tormented him, fueling his self-hatred. However, despite his anguish, his obsession with Adele persisted. Having lived countless times, Hexion couldn't forget the days he spent with her, longing to express his love once more. Once again, he found himself in darkness, pleading with the mysterious man for more time to fight back. But as long as he remained tied to Vial, he knew he couldn't muster a miracle powerful enough to overcome Vial's influence, even if the man gathered the strength of all his descendants. The man had hoped their desires would be sufficient to save Hexion, but it seemed they had plunged him into despair instead. If only destiny could carve a path for him to reach the depths of that forest. Before vanishing, the man prayed that at the end of Hexion's extended existence, he would experience a true miracle at least once. When he wakes up, Pan explains what was going on. In panic, Hexion tries to search for Adele, who, all this time, is holding his hand. With tears swelling in her eyes, Adele confesses that she had simply believed their meeting was a blend of destiny and chance in this life. But she realizes she was wrong. All this time, Hexion has been running toward her so they could reunite. Now they are finally together again. It's still so early to celebrate, but truly, I am so happy for them. Vial's energy may have subsided for now, but its remnants still linger. Just then, Pan informs them that a week has passed in the outside world, and to ensure they aren't late for Hexion's trip to the Imperial Palace, he gives Adele a butterfly pendant. This pendant will serve as Adele's communication with Pan in the outside world, as Pan is unable to leave the forest. Before they depart, Adele expresses her gratitude to the dragon and Pan. The dragon then recognizes how she takes after Huxenlight in that way. Outside, Jean suggests that Adele should return to the guild house since Vial's remnants haven't fully disappeared. However, Hexion refuses to leave her side for even a second. Just then, a small version of Pan reminds him to focus if he wishes to avoid another episode. He's so cute. Also, it's so funny how Hexion's reaction represents all of us. LOL. Inside, Pan reveals that he emerges from the pendant. While he can easily change the appearance of his main body, creating a piece of himself is no easy feat. In fact, he attempted to make this version resemble his main body, so he asks Adele if he looks strange. Despite his efforts to alter some changes in his form, it still doesn't resemble his main body. He's literally so hot and godly, but in his current figure, he's more like a keychain accessory. I'm so sorry, Pan. You still look cute, though. Jean wasn't concerned about Pan's appearance and was relieved that nothing major occurred in the forest. However, Hexion revealed that the Emperor's spies are still watching them, waiting for an opportune moment to strike. Adele then questioned if the Emperor ordered her assassination in a previous life, revealing that she also has memories from her past life. She suspected that Hexion's last reincarnation affected her and recalled hearing a woman's voice urging her to turn back time before her death. Pan suggested the voice was Huxenlight's and speculated that the man in Hexion's abyss was Alba Bestia. The last monolith's inscription spans several years, indicating a significant period of time. Hooks and Light's writing began after she sent her family out of the forest. Her routine started with waiting at the forest's edge, hoping her family would visit. She wrote the monoliths until late at night, dividing the contents to protect her powers. Using fairy sap at night, she imbued the text with inheritable strength, hoping her descendants would reach the forest safely. Decades passed in the outside world, indicating her family had aged. Despite knowing this, she continued to wait, longing for a brief connection with them. She made a letter to her descendants, hoping they would find it alongside the last monolith as proof that her bloodline lives on. Centuries passed as she wrote, nearing her final breath. She entrusted her remaining powers to the monolith, and instructed her descendants to take up the sacred sword, Shenete, from her grave, with Pan being the only one who knew its location. However, fairies could no longer approach her grave, which had become an enclosed space rejecting everything and everyone. Pan supposed she hoped to one day meet her descendant. A few moments later, Hexion assures Adele that his standard visit to the Imperial Palace will go smoothly, ensuring her of his safety. Just then, a letter arrives from Marquise Alia regarding the number of families with Kalat patients. Despite noting rebellion surrounding the issue, they aim to use it to their advantage. Before departing, Hexion positions his men to guard Adele. As he embraces her, Adele notices his elevated temperature. However, Hexion reassures her that he's fine and merely trying to contain his emotions. This time, he requests permission to let go of her, but Adele reminds him that they're changing everything despite Vial's attempt to tear them apart. She asks him to wait for her a bit longer, expressing confidence that someday they will achieve everything they desire in this life. Adele really knows what she wants and how to calm Hexion's anxiety. Now I'm getting jealous. Afterward, Adele discovers that Jean chose Luna to ensure her safety, using her to conceal his identity and existence. Doubts about her ability to fight arise within Adele, while Luna becomes angered by the fact that she can no longer meddle with her affairs. Meanwhile, Jean silently harbors disappointment and frustration towards himself. He had believed he could do anything for Adele. However, witnessing her repeat countless deaths left him feeling frustrated and disappointed in himself. Can't blame him. He's just a man in love one-sidedly. 2 days later, Adele meets up with Duchess Vifta. It is revealed that a few days ago, the Duchess overheard the Duke giving an order to target Adele. Adele questions why the Duchess went through the trouble of meeting her in person just to inform her of this. The Duchess clarifies that she didn't come because she likes Adele, but rather because she doesn't want her to die with Karena's name. She confesses that she has always harbored hatred towards Adele for taking her daughter's place and erasing her memory. Despite still feeling disgust towards Adele, as her daughter's replacement, she cannot allow her to die so pitifully. Until the end, this woman really only cares about her feelings. She doesn't deserve such a good daughter. Adele seizes the Duchess's desperation to acquire some information about her identity through Kuarn, realizing that the Duchess has been harboring her anger towards the Duke all this time. The fact that the Duke would turn against his own daughter suggests his involvement in Adele's previous deaths as well. Oddly, Adele feels oddly bitter. Suddenly, Luna instructs Adele to take the secret passageway. Tensions linger between them, particularly after learning of Jean's special treatment towards Adele. In the dark alley, Luna forgets to bring a lamp, expecting Adele to struggle with her dress. However, Adele surprises her by revealing her excellent night vision and suggests she takes the lead next time, offering to hold hands as well. Oh, roasted yet sweet. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, Hexion observes that the Emperor keeps steering the conversation back to Adele. However, the Emperor's expression abruptly shifts upon mentioning Hexion's Kalat. Despite being a god's curse, it can be almost entirely cured if the healer is genuinely devoted to the victim. The idea that such a curse could be lifted without medicine surprises Hexion. It's as if it transforms into a blessing from God, hinting that something suspicious is happening right under the Emperor's nose. Hexion remains stiff as the Emperor orders him to display his arms. Hexion knows better. After showing his hand with the symptoms, he assesses that the Emperor's reaction tells that he doesn't know exactly what the power of the monoliths is. That must be why he's been using Hexion to investigate them. Luckily, the man they suspected of working for the Emperor was carrying a substance that induces Kalat symptoms. He used it before meeting the Emperor so as not to risk the Emperor learning about Adele's powers. Hexion then frankly admits that he has been struggling lately and further suggests his suddenly dropped dead in a foreign land. This kind of manipulation is to keep the Emperor's focus on him. After all, he needs his body, so he will never be able to kill him. He realizes that if he wants to guarantee Adele's safety, he must become her shield. Meanwhile, Kuarn argues with the noble girl he calls Banana for making him do everything she pleases. The girl only wants him to protect her from any attacks, to which he refused to believe. Suddenly, he notices something, and before an arrow can hit the girl, he blocks it using his abilities. They say that the more you hate, the more you love. Well, I'm excited to see how these two get along. He knows that when these types of men are caught, they kill themselves, but this time, he stops the man and knocks him out unconsciously. With his arrogance, he claims to be more capable than Hexion, but the girl is more concerned about everything she brought. He can't believe that he's using magic to summon everything to stop her whining. But the girl seems to have fallen for a brutish man getting into her rose garden-filled heart. Now this is what I'm talking about. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!